flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Today's meeting will start with a public portion where any member of the public may address the board on any topic. We ask that you mute your devices when you come onto the line so we don't get feedback, and that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We have the following topics to discuss today. We have bids with Jeannie Carroza, draft 2022 capital plan with Rebecca Hansen, East Hampton Airport review of draft scoping outline for the generic environmental impact statement and draft, positive declaration, Dan Redzo, Lisa LaCourie, AKRF Consultants, discussion of proposed changes to street parking in downtown Montauk with Councilman Lease, proposed amendments to Chapter 167, littering, with Councilwoman Kathy Burke-Gonzalez and David McMaster, proposed amendment of town parking regulations on North Main Street, Councilwoman Kathy Burke-Gonzalez and David McMaster, and discussion of the Springs Library Americans for Disability Act renovations with myself. Liaison reports will follow, and we have a few resolutions to do as well. I will be taking public comment after the airport discussion. Again, we would ask that you keep those comments to the specific topic discussed and not just general airport. If you have general comments about the airport, please keep those to the public portion. Again, we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And at this point, Jason, do you have any callers on the line?
Yes, we do. I will unmute the first caller right now. Hello, caller. You're on the air. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you right now.
Great. Good morning, and thank you for taking my call. My name is Michael Mella. My wife, Lisa, and I live at 167 North Main Street on the corner of Indian Hill Road. The last house on North Main Street is one drives into the Springs. This is where 3 Mile Harbor Road and Springs Fireplace Road intersect. We bought our house in 1986. Between our house and Miller Terrace, the short block being discussed regarding parking regulations, there are 3 additional family homes. A parking sign in front of my house reads 2-hour parking 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. There are additional signs with the same parking restrictions all the way to Cedar Street. Oddly, there is a town ordinance on the books backing up the signage between Cedar Street and Miller Terrace. That's where the East Hampton Historical Farm plus 5 homes are, but no ordinance on the books to back up the signage between Miller Terrace and Indian Hill Road, the last houses where I live. The gas station auto repair shop across North Main Street from us became aware of this lack of parking ordinance about 5 years ago. Since then, they use every parking space from my house to Miller Terrace to park their tow trucks and vehicles to be worked on, and once finished and waiting to be picked up. The end result, daily from Monday through Saturday, every parking space is occupied. I've sent many photos backing up my claim, most recently to Kathy Burke-Gonzalez. As soon as one vehicle is picked up, they move another one into that space, never leaving even one space open for a visiting friend to park. To add insult to injury, having one or often 2 huge commercial tow trucks in front of our house does distract from the residential feeling of our block. Why there is a parking ordinance for Cedar Street to Miller Terrace and not one for Miller Terrace to Indian Hill Road is a mystery. My guess, there was an oversight or a clerical mistake. Thank you.
Thank you for calling, Michael. Appreciate your comments, and we'll be discussing this later in the work session. Can we go to the next caller, please, Jason?
Of course. Hello, caller ending 0673. You're on the air. Hello.
Good morning, Supervisor and members of the Town Board. This is Erin King Sweeney, Executive Director of the East Hampton Community Alliance. As tensions surrounding the future of the East Hampton Airport continue to escalate, EHCA is encouraging the board to work together with the community to address the stated desire of 80% of residents to keep the airport open. Much has been said about option 2 versus option 5. This does not need to be a binary decision with two sides pitted against each other. There can be options 6, 7, or even 8. We're aware of past history, litigation, and outside influences. We recognize the same to be true today. Our goal is to stay focused on finding a reasonable and responsible future for HTO. Let's not allow litigation and past grievances to get in the way of finding a responsible future for HTO. HCA remains committed to working together with the town to help craft that future. Thank you.
Thank you for calling, Aaron.
Okay. With that said, we currently don't have any callers on the line, but we had one caller call in, then drop off. I just want to make sure we give them a quick moment if they want to call back right now. The caller's last 4 digits were 8806. If you want to call back in, just let me know. Okay. And so far, still nothing. Mr. Supervisor, if you wish to proceed, I'll have the TV ready.
Yes, let's proceed with bids, and then we'll check back to see if anybody from the public's called in before we get into the meat of our topics here. So we have Jeannie Carosa with us today.
She's being led to the room right now.
Good morning. Whoops.
Morning, Jean.
How are you?
How are you, Jean?
Good, good. Just a couple of items today. I just have a few notices, and then I'll be introducing Melissa. Notices for bids available will be for the Gilbert property demolition. Then we're going to have the mobile food concessions, and then next week we'll have available the Downs property demolition. And we also did an RFP for the professional engineering services for Georgia Capone at the Route 27 rest stop, stormwater abatement. And here with the results of the evaluation is Melissa Winslow to make that recommendation for the project.
Thank you, Jeannie.
You're welcome.
And Melissa Winslow's coming in right now.
Good morning, Melissa. Welcome.
Good morning.
You have some recommendations for us?
Yes, so I'm Melissa Winslow. I'm a senior environmental analyst in the Natural Resources Department, and I will be making the award to the town board for the Georgia Capone at Route 27 rest stop stormwater abatement technical design RFP. So just a little bit of background. The town board awarded CPF water quality funding through the 2021 RFA for final engineering design for stormwater abatement at Route 27 rest stop in Wainscott. The rest stop is immediately adjacent to Talmadge Creek and has a direct input of stormwater runoff to Georgia Capone. The town of East Hampton and Friends of Georgia Capone executed a memorandum of understanding in 2020 and received the support of the town to move the project forward through the issuance of an RFP to retain an engineer to complete the work. The RFP included 3 project areas to be considered for stormwater abatement through the coordination with New York State Department of Transportation, Peconic Land Trust, and Friends of Georgia Capone. These areas included the Route 27 rest stop owned by New York State, the Georgia Capone Preserve owned by Peconic Land Trust, located at the corner of Montauk Highway and Wainscott Stone Road, along with the road right-of-way along Old Montauk Highway directly north of the rest stop. The RFP was issued once in July of 2021 and rejected to adjust the scope of work and get a little bit more substantial detail in the proposals. Went back out in October of 2021. The RFP included, in addition to project completion proposals, site plans, and final bid specs, on-site feasibility testing, which would include soil analysis, infiltration testing, groundwater depth investigation, and water quality monitoring plans. The proposals also included maintenance and project management plans with community outreach and education components. So the selection committee reviewed all of 3 proposals that we received for this project. The criteria for review included experience with similar projects with a proven track record, experience with sustainable landscapes and water quality improvement, incorporation of management plans and measurable water quality improvement techniques, a focus on best available technology and innovative designs, a clear understanding of the requirements of the RFP, and lastly, cost. The costs ranged from $81,270 to $119,700. The review committee called in all 3 teams for interviews. We weren't able to make a recommendation based on just the review alone of the proposals. Following the review interviews, the committee unanimously agreed to recommend Nbaa engineers and architects with a total cost of $119,700. The committee thought that the Nbaa proposal was the most well-prepared and thorough. The team actually reviewed some of the existing reports that has been generated by the town, like the water quality improvement plan. They also incorporated recommendations from the Georgia Capone action plan to ensure consistency of the designs. The Nbaa team was the only team to propose innovative solutions for stormwater abatement that would be appropriate for the sites. They also incorporated some on-site observations into their proposal to provide details and recommendations for the best possible treatment. And then they were the only team that provided detail on previous work that they've completed. So they gave us some confidence in their abilities. So the selection committee is recommending the board award the 27 rest stop final engineering design to Nbaa engineers and architects.
Thank you, Melissa. Any questions from the board members? Excellent. Okay, we'll move on then. Thanks so much, Melissa. Jeannie.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You
You
too.
too.
Do we have Rebecca Hanson in the?
Yep, she's coming in right now.
Excellent. So our next topic for discussion is the draft 2022 capital plan, and we have our budget director, Becky Hanson, with us today. Hello, Becky.
Hi, good morning, Supervisor, member of the town board. So on Friday, I provided everybody with an update to the capital plan that was presented last Tuesday. And as we expected, there have been some changes, which is not unusual by any means. So the total plan right now, we are looking at just under $15 million, 14.9. And based on last week's recommendation and approval to the board, I did, you will see on the plan itself, those items that are highlighted in green, those items are under are $25,000 or less, which I am proposing to be funded through fund balance. And those total projects is $488,000. So when all is said and done, the total debt, that the town will be looking at will be just over 14 million. So let's go through some of the additions from the last plan. We have some projects that we need to do at the Recreation Center, the YMCA, which it includes roof replacement and an HVAC replacement project. There were some funds that were borrowed last year for a portion of the roof project, so those will carry over and will also go towards these costs. We have also added some other infrastructure projects from the police department for the main or the prime communications site over here at the town hall campus, which also includes a roof replacement project, gutter replacements. There are some flooding concerns that the chief feels that needs to be addressed before it becomes more of a larger problem down the road. And in addition, he has requested a replacement of the batteries at the tower sites. They are currently 4 years old, and this is part of a normal replacement project, replacement cycle for those types of batteries. In addition, one of the only other major changes was in ordinance. We had previously requested a hybrid replacement pickup truck, and that has been upgraded to an electric due to, to comply better with the fleet efficiency policy, that where we can purchase an electric instead of a hybrid, we are going to do that as well. Ricky Talmadge, we were able to locate one that ordinance feels would be an appropriate use for the department. And then finally, we have added replacing the flooring in the town attorney's office. So I don't know.
Becky, there was one other addition. Forgive me if I didn't hear you mention it, but townwide ADA
Oh,
improvement.
yes, I'm sorry, Supervisor, you are correct. I did have that.
I requested that we add $250,000 in each of the subsequent 3 years.
Mhm. Yep, and that has been included as well.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions for Becky at this point?
I do. There's another request that's there. I don't know if it was brought up. It's going to be for the bonding for the Little League ball fields. Again, the Little League ball fields would be, there's $1.75 million that would be coming back from the Southampton Hospital project, part of their lease agreement. But I would recommend bonding for $3.2 million for the project. In advance of that, what that would do was give us contingency for construction and also the amenities that the board would like to see as we get ready for that design. That was one.
David, what was the amount?
$3.2 million.
So that's a bit more than what we originally figured, right?
Correct. There's a.
Have we gotten any preliminary numbers back yet?
We did. I circulated them. I'll circulate them again. The numbers come back with an added increase for the pavilion. It might be a little higher than before. There's also the additional engineering, which we never picked up the first time, which would be good for construction overview. We added in a large line for landscaping also. Added back into the scoreboards also. And then, of course, with a 5% contingency, that increases the overall number. But I can forward that around again.
Thanks, Dave.
No problem.
That clarification. Any other questions or comments?
I have two others, and it just goes about the numbers, knowing that this is a flowing document or such. It's in two. One was in sanitation. I know we're looking at a new scale. My question is, if we're thinking the scale would be, either it's actually that scale, and then also even with the Pussy's Pond Bridge. My question is, do we bond for the engineering now, or put that in and then put the rest in for 2023? The difference, let's say if we did $250 for engineering for each project and bond when needed. What I just don't want to do is I don't want to get caught paying debt service on it or on any bonds we take out for these projects that might not be built for another year.
I mean, you can do that if the engineering or design study is going to lead to the project itself, similar to what's been proposed for the senior center. You can authorize borrowing for that portion, and then you can actually roll that into, when you go to do the financing for the full project, you can just roll that in, because initially the PPU on a engineering or design plan is only 5 years, and if you roll it into a larger project, then you're extending that out to 20 or 30 years, depending on what the project is.
If you anticipate the project will actually go under construction in a subsequent year, it's probably better to put the largest amount, to cover that in that subsequent year.
I can do that. I can put those into 2023.
And that's why I was even looking at other. I just want to make sure the number matches close to as much debt service as we're putting down right now.
And the question, David, is the highway department roof replacement. Is that something that's going to be done this year, or is that something that's going to be constructed?
That's another one also. I was just looking at on there. I know we're doing engineering right now, so I can get that confirmation on that from the engineer. I'll look into that maybe by the end of the day. But again, that's one, a lot of the roof repairs that are there obviously are needed, and they're going to be for sustainability. But again, I know it brings me back to the Amagansett comfort station. Many times when we put things out there, we have less after we bond for it because of the debt service. But I can look into that one also. If we're not going to build that this year, I would say put it into 2023 also.
So I just want to be clear, as far as the ball field is concerned, as Councilman Lee said, if the proposal is 3.2, the hospital portion is 1.75 million, which would leave the town's portion at 1.45 million. So by doing short term, you could take the payment that you receive from the hospital and pay that portion of the debt off immediately. But is that something that you do want to include at this time?
Yeah, I think we can do those in bands and then bond for, after reimbursement for the actual amount of expenditure that the town has. Does that make sense?
Or could we borrow from fund balance and not do, and then replenish the fund balance when the hospital pays us?
You could do that.
That would be another way.
Mm-hmm.
The only other discussion point I had on here right now, and again, this is up for discussion, is that the pile mates for Three Mill Harbor, which is 20 grand. I do know that we're looking to do that from fund balance, or is that something to be more appropriate for the South Fork Wind Farm funding, since it is something to do with maritime and marine use also. That could be a larger discussion for where that goes, but those are just the comments I had there. Again, for any of those three larger projects, I think we could always bond from them when needed, but I don't want to just start paying debt service on something. I'd rather maybe partition it out. But again, I know Kate and Sylvia are working on those other two. I'd like to hear from them also. Those are just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else?
Yeah, Peter, I just want to, while we have the budget open, I just want to make you all aware that I've been in contact with the engineers that were working on the Old Stone Highway bridge replacement or repair, and I should have some estimates by the end of the week to submit. I do see a little over $1 million in the budget put aside for this in this budget. That's the Old Stone Highway Bridge in Springs that goes over the Pussy Pond culvert.
Yes. Okay.
If there are going to be additional numbers that are going to come after Thursday, we were initially planned to adopt this on Thursday, but we could push that to the first March meeting if you want, because then we have to get into doing all of our adopting resolutions, which are normally done in March.
Thanks. Let me see if I can get the numbers in before that then.
But the reality is that's something that we just discussed was probably we're only going to do the engineering in 2022 and the construction is going to go into 2023. So we can bring that number down as David suggested. And then when you get the firm estimate, we'll have that for 2023 or a firmer estimate.
Yeah, that should come in on Friday.
Okay. Very good. So we're ready to move on? People in agreement with that?
Yeah, and I thank you, Becky, for renaming an IT, the web portal online system, so that doesn't affect any of our procurement on there. But I'm actually very excited for that aspect of it. I think that's going to be very good for the public.
So I don't know that we're clear on the recommendation that I like that Kathy had of just using 1.7 million that we know is going to be reimbursed to the town from the hospital. So are we moving forward with that suggestion?
I'm fine with taking that out of.
Yeah, I made a note to put into the plan, which would actually be the town's portion for the borrowing, which would be 1.45, and then the other portion of it would be advanced.
Okay, instead of the 3.2. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure we agreed on that.
Okay, great.
And I know this is unconventional, and I know that $15 million number will come down based on our conversations, but do we want to put a footnote on here that the monies that are be available from the dissolution of the scavenger waste plant, the 1.7, and then the ARPA money, because typically we our capital plan, offsets what the debt that we're retiring. Here, it may be over that. and, but we're doing that consciously, knowing that there's the 1.7 from the scavenger waste and also from the ARPA money. So it's just, I think we should have a footnote on here and.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially since the scavenger waste will hopefully come to a full conclusion. At the latest would be you guys would adopt a resolution at the second March meeting. If we can do it by the first one after we close the hearing this week, that would be great. And then once that's closed, then then the board has the authorization to move those funds into the general fund, for capital projects. So as soon as that's done, then you'll be able to legally access that money.
And I believe there's also another $500,000 coming from South Fork Wind as well, right?
I think another 250,000.
All right.
Okay, great.
Thanks so much, Becky.
Thanks,
All right, I'll make revisions and circulate it again prior to its adoption.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody.
So our next topic of discussion is the East Hampton Airport review of draft scoping outline for generic environmental impact statement and draft. We have outside counsel Dan Rezzo, Lisa LaCourie, and AKRF to present. And again, I would ask that the public, if they have specific comments relating to this presentation, if they want to call in and make those known to us. We'll take public comment after this section of discussion. And welcome, Dan. Welcome, Peter. Hello, Lisa.
Good morning.
How's everyone doing this morning?
Well, thank you.
Good. Good. If you want to go ahead and Lisa, you want to introduce this topic, or Dan?
So yeah, let me do that.
I think we have a PowerPoint presentation as well.
We do. So good morning, Supervisor and members of the town board. Following up on the continuing seeker-related activities for the East Hampton Airport. Today we are presenting for your review a resolution for issuing a positive declaration in connection with the long-term operations at the new airport, and a draft scope or scoping outline on a draft generic environmental impact statement that would be prepared in connection with the long-term operational changes being contemplated. Again, this is sort of a continuing set of activities. In January, we looked, and the board considered a permissible segmented action of deactivating the East Hampton Airport and opening a new airport. Based on the activities that we anticipated and the timing, that negative declaration was issued. It recognized that the long-term operations at the new airport, to the extent they would be changed from the existing operations, would require the preparation of an environmental impact statement to consider the effects, primarily diversion effects, to the extent that aircraft operations were limited compared to the current operations. The next slide, Peter. Where we are now is the board has been considering, and these discussions have been going on for well over a year, of potential types of limitations that might be considered under a prior permission required framework, which would be the nature of the operation of the airport after it was opened as a private use airport. These factors were taken into account in looking at the potential impacts associated with that activity. And because this is a discretionary action, SEQA requires the consideration of the impacts of that. what we have done with, and I'll turn this over to Lisa LaCurry. Lisa has prepared a full environmental assessment form. We've had some of your comments on all of that, and leading to a positive declaration, which is a declaration that one or more impacts are potentially significant associated with that action. And then that triggers the need for a draft EIS and consideration. We have recommended to consider the use of a draft generic environmental impact statement because the nature of what you're doing is less sort of a physical activity, but rather programmatic changes. And there are a range of changes, and the GEIS process fits well into the consideration of both the activities and the impacts and how to balance them in really the best way. It also provides, as the seeker process carries on, an opportunity for public input and comment in a formal manner, responses to those comments, leading to a final generic impact statement and ultimately seeker findings by the board prior to making any final decisions. So with that, let me turn this back over to Lisa for a moment to sort of walk you through the positive declaration, the full EAF and positive declaration portion.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. So good morning. I'm Lisa LaCorey, and I've worked with the town on this airport project for over a year, and I'm helping with now the seeker review for your actions for going forward. So as you know, the seeker regulations have multiple steps and multiple acronyms too that you need to look at for examining whether an action might have a harmful effect on the environment. And if it's a harmful effect, it's called the positive declaration. So as soon as practicable, the lead agency, which is you, the town board, should classify the action. And in this case, we've identified it as an unlisted action. Next, we look at what the potential impacts are of the action. And we do that by completing environmental assessment forms, or EAFs, parts 1, 2, and 3. And as those are yes, no, check the box type of forms, we've also prepared a narrative explaining why we've done yes or no, and we've called that a supplemental narrative. And then, come up with the part 3. And then the next thing is that we review those forms and the supplemental narrative, and we identify whether or not there is a potential for one or more significant adverse environmental impacts. So what did we find? Well, let's go to the next slide. So the proposed action, and again, the action we're talking about now is utilizing a prior permission required framework to effect operational changes, modifications and restrictions at the new airport once it's reopened. And that would not require any physical changes or improvements or alterations to the new airport. And while airport that might have been bound for the new airport might be diverted to other proximate airports, and we're calling those proximate airports affected airports, those operations would only be accommodated to the extent that the affected airports have the capacity to handle that additional traffic. So there's no plan of which we're aware of, the lead agency or the consultants, to expand the capacity, the physical structure of any of the affected airports. And similarly, the proposed action would not result in any physical impacts to the land outside of the affected airports. Therefore, the proposed action would not result in or have an adverse effect to the geology, to the soils, to the topography, wouldn't change construction activities or stormwater runoff, infrastructure, utilities, subsurface hazard materials, or cultural resources. Now, the affected airports who might be affected by diversion are primarily Montauk, Gabreski, and Southampton heliport. And the action could have potentially significant impacts on the noise at and surrounding these airports. It could have adverse impacts on the number, the type, the time, and the frequency of the aircraft operations at both the new airport and at these affected airports. It could affect the volume and patterns of ground vehicular traffic at and surrounding the airports. And while the action itself is designed to help East Hampton gain better control over the use of the users at the new airport and shape it to better fit in with the community, the resulting diversion could affect the community character of the affected airports and the surrounding areas. And some of those affected airports, Montauk, for example, are in some very sensitive areas. They're surrounded by parkland, they have critical environmental areas, they've got important plants and those type of things. So all of those go into how it could be affecting the character of the affected airports. So those are potential large adverse impacts from the project. Other potential impacts, the action could affect the air quality and greenhouse gases. It's really kind of unknown whether it's going to be just moved around or whether there's going to be more or whether there's going to be less as a result of a change of operations. It also could have an impact on noise-sensitive wildlife. So we've identified that the action may have one or more significant adverse impacts, and SECRA calls that a positive declaration. It's a little, counterintuitive. But so if you have reached the point where you call that a positive declaration, you then need to prepare an environmental impact statement. And as Dan already just mentioned, there's this tool called a generic environmental impact statement, which is allowed to evaluate a program with a range of alternatives, which is suitable for this project. So now I'm going to hand the ball over to my colleague at AKRF Associates. I'm not sure that you've met this consulting firm before, but I will let Peter Farreau introduce himself and start to go over what the process would be after you defined that this could have a positive effect or a positive impact on the environment.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. Good afternoon. Good morning still. My name is Peter Farreau, and I'm a Senior Technical Director of Planning with AKRF Incorporated. We're a firm that is familiar with the town, has worked with the town on a few projects in the past, and we are grateful to be able to continue that work with the town. And we were brought in to assist Lisa and Dan and the entire team help move through this EIS process. And while it may be familiar to some of you, I wanted to just go over that EIS process a little bit and what you as the town and the public can expect during this process, including the times during which there is mandatory public input and the ways in which that input is then taken into account by the town through that process. So the first step, once the positive declaration is adopted by the lead agency, in this case the town, is that a scoping document is prepared and a draft of that scoping document. And the town's consultants have prepared such a draft. It is in your package for review. And basically what the scope is a table of contents for the GEIS. It puts out the potential areas of environmental significance that Lisa has described and outlines the chapters or areas of analysis that will be studied in the EIS. And when available, the methodologies by which those analyses will be undertaken. When that document is released by the town, it opens a public comment period on that GEIS scope. And that's kind of why this box is highlighted a little bit. So right now, the town, we're suggesting, and I think the town is considering a scoping comment period that would start when the positive declaration is adopted by the town as early as this coming Thursday, and would continue for approximately a month ending on March 18th. And during that time, there would be written comments accepted by the town, as well as email comments. And there would be a public scoping session Similar maybe in look and feel to a public hearing, but it's not a technical hearing. But it is a public meeting where comments on that draft scope are accepted by the town. The town then takes those comments, updates the draft scope as necessary, and issues that final draft scope. And based on that final draft scope, the town and its consultants prepare a draft of that generic environmental impact statement. And in essence, as we'll get to in a minute, we would be focusing on looking at what the effects of kind of a PPR system in the summer of 2022 would actually in a minute. The consultants would prepare that draft GEIS, submit it to the town. The town would review it. The town board would review it for completeness and make sure it actually addresses all the things it was supposed to in the scope. And once that process is done, the town would officially accept the draft GEIS and publish it. And once published, it would be, again, open for public comment. There's a mandatory public hearing. There would be written comment periods. And we anticipate that could occur as early as the fall of 2022. Based on those public comments, the town and its consultants would prepare a final generic environmental impact statement that would include responses to all substantive written and oral comments received on the GEIS. And based upon that final generic environmental impact statement, the town would issue an environmental finding statement, and that would conclude the seeker process. And the finding statement would summarize the environmental impacts and mitigation and set forth the town board's rationale for a decision on adopting a PPR on a permanent basis. And we anticipate that could occur late in the winter of 2023. So we're looking at January, February timeframe. Obviously, the winter could be either way, couldn't it? Once seeker is concluded, the town board would then be in a position to take action on a full and permanent PPR system. So that's the EIS process, believe it or not, in a nutshell. And so I wanted to just take a couple minutes to go over what is in the GEIS scoping outline, the draft of which was prepared and is published right now. In essence, what the GEIS, what the DGEIS would do is kind of take a real world look at what the impacts of that PPR system or a PPR system would be and compare it to historical flight operations. While there have been studies and analyses that looked at closure or other restrictions, it isn't clear what the actual impacts may be. And so in order to find that out, the DGEIS would actually look at real data from the 4 airports, the new town airport, Montauk, Gabreski, and the Southampton heliport, and really look at what happened in 2022 and how does that compare to prior years. At the same time, we would also look at vehicular traffic data, very much for the same reasons. You know, are there noticeable and material shifts in the mode of travel from aircraft to vehicles? Are there changes in traffic patterns around those 4 airports that could affect intersections, pedestrian safety, vehicular noise? All of these items would be looked at in the GEIS. The GIS would also look, as Lisa said, at land use and community character. So at first, it would inventory and review the existing types and intensity of land uses surrounding the 4 airports, and really look at the impacts that the PPR would have on community character. So looking at the impacts of flights, of noise, of traffic, and what impacts combined, what those items combined would have on community character around the 4 airports. Obviously, the GEIS would look at aircraft noise. We'd compare 2022 data with historical data, very similar to the way that we would do that for flight operations. We'd look at yearly impacts to the extent that the data is available. But mostly we'd be looking at peak season impacts, that summer peak season, as well as some peak periods during that peak season, peak weekends, et cetera. And again, this would be for all 4 of the airports. As Lisa said, we'd be looking at energy, air quality, climate change, trying to figure out and really analyze what the change in emissions from flights, from vehicles, including greenhouse gases, including changes in traffic patterns, what impact that would have kind of regionally, as well as locally in the areas surrounding the airports and at kind of affected intersections. And then as required by SEEKR, and one of the hallmarks of SEEKR, we'd be looking at alternatives to the proposed action. And the no action alternative is required by SEEKR. In this case, it would be continuing to operate the airport without a PPR framework. What would the impacts of that alternative be? And then kind of on the other end of the spectrum, at a worst case analysis, what would closure of the new airport look like, and what impacts may that have? But then somewhere in between those, and really this is kind of the heart of the GEIS, is looking at alternative restrictions, so range of programmatic alternatives that the town may consider in the future, and what impacts that those alternatives may have on both East Hampton and the other affected airports. And that's just a brief outline of what's in the GEIS scope. As I said, it's in your package, it's posted. And if you have any questions, happy to answer it. But I think to conclude, I'll turn it back to Dan to look at and talk through the next steps.
So thank you so much, Peter. So the next step is at the upcoming town board meeting on Thursday to continue your review of the EAF and positive declaration. The resolution has been prepared that reflects those documents, and the resolution is a combined resolution that would issue a positive declaration, as Lisa has explained, requiring the preparation of a draft generic environmental impact statement. It would accept the draft scope for release to the public for public comments, set a public scoping meeting for March 1st, which I think is your next workshop meeting, presumably by Zoom. The COVID extension by the governor is now through the middle of March, I think, so the Zoom meetings could continue. And a final date for public comments on the scope of March 18th. There's working with the town clerk's office and your IT department, there'll be a dedicated web link for submitting comments. The draft scope will be available for public. It's now on your packet, but it'll be available for public access. And that's our next step. The GEIS process and the scoping process, particularly where there's no applicant involved, it's the town's own direct action, is quite flexible. It's intended to elicit public input and help inform your future decisions. The team that you have assembled, the technical team, will review those comments as they come in and work with the board to come up with a final scope that will then sort of launch the preparation and data collection going forward. So that's where we are, Supervisor.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions at this point for?
I do, and it goes back to I believe it's page 7, where part of the scoping outline is we're going to compare the flight operations at the new airport, Montauk Airport, Bobresky, and Southampton Heliport. And obviously, I don't know if those airports have really shared their operation data in the past, or if it's something, obviously, we need to do an outreach to those airports and ask if they'll cooperate with this study. But I guess, this part will only be as good as the data we get to collect.
Peter will let you address that in the first.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you're absolutely correct, right? My understanding is the town has some data through its existing relationships, through Jim's existing relationships and others, right, have been able to get some data, understanding there are some gaps and different levels of granularity with which that data is available, which I think is actually going to be pretty important here, right? We need to get at not just total operations, what types of operations, when, but there are some other ways that we might be able to go about obtaining that data, even if it's not directly available from an airport operator. And so we're working with your team that's already in place to identify options to kind of get that data when it might not otherwise be available. And so we'll do, as part of Seeker, right, we'll do the best we can. We can't do it with what we don't have, for sure. And Seeker doesn't require that. But you're absolutely right that, it'll only be as good as the data we get. But we think we have some leads on good data, let's say.
Great. Thanks, Peter.
It's one of the advantages of the environmental review process. It's both an advantage sometimes and a disadvantage, but depending on where you sit, is that it requires boards to do things that are reasonable. You can't do the impossible. And so you strive to get the best quality data that you can. If it's not being made available to you, you make assumptions based on the available data that is there. And you proceed. You weigh and balance all of the information. You look at it. You take a careful evaluation of its relative weight and quality, and you, as the lead agency, ultimately will make that decision based on the best available information that both you are able to obtain, the public provides to you, the adjacent municipalities as well, and as well as the airport operators. But we will certainly reach out to them all as part of this process to gain that information, and we go from there.
Thanks, Dan.
Any other questions for the consultants today? So I just wanted to say that, this is something that we will be receiving comments from the public on, again, from the 17th of February right through March 18th. We already have actually those documents posted on the town website. There will be a dedicated email address that you can send your comments on the scope to, and we'll have that available for you. And, this process is going to take some time, and we want to fully engage the public in this process and with developing the prior permission required restrictions as well. This is a pretty historic, I think, time here in East Hampton with regard to the airport. We hope that people will be cooperative in going through this process, and we want to engage the aviation industry and pilots in this process so that we have a clear and transparent discussion about how to move forward constructively and collaboratively in order to have an airport. And so I think this is the pathway that we're engaged in and undertaking, and we hope that people will be engaged and will cooperate in this effort to have the best possible outcome that we can. Are there any other comments from board members or the consultants at this point? I do want to go back to the phone line specifically for this topic. If there are any specific comments from the public directly relating to the topic we've just discussed. Jason, do we have any callers on the line?
Yes, we do. Unmuting first caller.
Thank you.
Hello, caller ending 8806. You're on the air.
Hi, thanks a lot. I dropped off earlier to wait for the airport portion. My name is Jeff Smith. I'm the Vice President of Operations for the Eastern Region Helicopter Council. Thank you all for your time. Like you, I'm exhausted on the back and forth of the state of the airport. As I've expressed publicly, I believe that you as the elected governing body of the East Hampton have done your due diligence, spending the time and resources when it comes to finding how to make the airport fit the community's needs and benefit, especially your secret briefing that you just received that showed what we all knew about adverse effects of diversion of airports. I have been close to this issue for over 2 decades and have volunteered vast amounts of my personal time to be an advocate for a safe and community-compatible asset. When routes needed to be developed, I worked with the airport manager to construct and enforce them. When we had an operator that was not being compliant, you asked for me to rein them in, which I did. While some people believe noise abatement procedures were a farce, we had a very high level of compliance, but it wasn't enough. Since 2013, it's been very clear that the status quo had a very short shelf life. Those that did not and have not understood this have either been asleep or misguided. We are now at the time where the town will achieve their goal of an airport where they are in control. The grant assurances have expired. I believe you all to be sincere in your plan of having an airport. I do not share with some of the factions that spit conspiracy and corruption. I believe that you've had some bad advice and a narrative that has changed. I see why the November 20 letter from the FAA would lead you to believe an easy transition from public to private. I believe the letter was hypothetical at best. It did not get into the nitty-gritty on how it would actually happen. I was surprised your council did not advise you on how procedurally the town and the FAA were entering very uncharted waters, something the FAA is very reluctant to embark. The February 2nd letter, which turned into theater and circus for some, spelled out some very serious issues with the transition. Love them or hate them, the FAA will be a very important part of the process. They must unravel the old airport and then activate the new. After it is activated, you will have exactly what you've always wanted, local control. It is in your grasp. The only thing that will stop that from happening will be litigation from either side of the issue. Litigation will strip away what you've fought for and spent so much money over the years and deliver it to the courts. A judge and a high-priced lawyers will decide the fate of the airport. You and I will be bystanders. Your counterpart in the transition, the FAA, will fold up their chairs, pack the station wagon, and head for the house until the court case is over. They do not spend time or waste resources on hypotheticals, but you can stop them all in their tracks. Table the 7480 deactivation process today, allow the FAA to work through the processes they must develop, hold their feet to the fire along with stakeholders to find common legal ground in a fairly timely manner. Leadership takes strength and courage, which I've seen you exhibit. While it's true that almost 80% of your constituents want the airport to stay open, the same number of constituents find you favorable as their leaders. You won handedly your last election because at some point your opposition posed a plan to shut down the airport for a year to see what happens with total disregard to other communities. He wanted to do it intentionally. So by God, let's not do it unintentionally. So Peter, I ask you, with everything we've learned in the past week, is the town board still determined to stay the path of closure on the 28th, or can we push the pause button until we have all the answers?
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Jeff. I appreciate, again, your spirit of cooperation and trying to get to a point where we have an airport that really reflects the community. And your comments about those who in the past have been maybe short-sighted about where we were heading and the need to really rein in airport traffic and operations to a level that the community would support. So, I appreciate all that very much. We look forward to continuing to work with you and all the other stakeholders, and particularly FAA, which we've been in constant contact with for the last several weeks, and are working out any of the potential issues and concerns that have been brought up by them and by others. And we have some concerns of our own. So we'll continue to meet with them and try to get through this in a way that results with the type of airport that we really want, that the community can support.
All right, I'll move on to the next caller. And caller ending 9539. You're on the air. Hello.
Hi, yeah, my name is Edward Soreman. I fly out of East Hampton Airport. I am very disappointed in the fact that the United States has gone from a constitutional republic to a democracy to authoritarianism. You have a town board who was elected primarily on closing the airport, and you're stewards of a valuable community asset. And you keep saying community, but the real crux of the matter is the community really wants the airport, and there's a very small minority that you're appeasing that wants it closed. Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling, Edward.
Okay, moving on to the next caller. Hello, caller ending 4477. You are on the air.
Good morning, Mr. Venskoyak and board members. My name is Alex Kurtzen. I'm Director of Airports at the National Business Aviation Association, Nbaa. I appreciate the opportunity to participate virtually today from Washington, D.C. To me, Nbaa represents over 11,000 member companies and professional members who operate all types of aircraft as part of their business or are involved with business aviation in various roles. Our members include numerous tenants and users of the East Hampton Airport. Nbaa has approached the airport as an ecosystem, a bubble of life, if you will, where each type of operation from light general aviation aircraft to seaplanes, helicopters, and jets to the support services such as airport management, maintenance, and the fixed-base operator sound aviation all play an important role and are codependent on each other in contributing to the viability and sustainability of the airport, which in turn serves the community and, as we have learned from many studies, is an economic contributor to the region. We advocate to find solutions of all types of operators to continue in an efficient and neighborly way. And over the last 6 years, I have personally worked to bridge the gaps to achieve this goal. The airport is unarguably one of the town's most valuable assets, and I wanted to acknowledge the effort the board undertook in going through the decision-making process, determining its future last year. We recognize your leadership setting out on a path to preserve the airport. However, as you have heard from other stakeholders, I would like to note that Nbaa is also very much concerned about the faulty plan to close HTO and reopen a new airport as detailed in the town's resolution from January 18th. This path is plagued with both legal and logistical issues, even beyond what is addressed in the February 2nd FAA letter. I'm happy to discuss in more detail outside of this call. The aviation community is really proud of the collaborative work we have done to develop the voluntary noise abatement program over the years. Last season, we have further enhanced the noise abatement procedures, which include all types of aircraft and operations that serve HTO. We recognize that more can be done and believe that by joining forces, we can find solutions where the airport can continue to serve the east end of Long Island while also being a quieter neighbor to the surrounding residents. We believe this path is possible through the current framework that is already in place without the need to circumvent rather than work through FAA procedures. In order to accomplish this, we urge the board to abandon the current path that jeopardizes the future utility of the airport, withdraw the Form 7480 associated with the closure and reopening of the airport. Let's take the time beyond February 28th to collaboratively come together to develop solutions, working with, not against the FAA, joined by the aviation community. Thank you for your invitation in your remarks, and the airport neighbors. To be most effective and successful, we need to do this sitting around the table, not having each group develop their proposals in isolation and submit them to the town. We are at a critical decision point. So, Mr. Supervisor and board members, which is it going to be? Are we going to show the local residents and the rest of the nation looking at us to solve this challenge that no matter how hard it is, it can be done collaboratively? Or are we going to take the path of force and confrontation and will ultimately squander this unique opportunity? Again, thank you for the time and all the effort you're dedicating to the airport. Nbaa and its members are here to support you and the airport staff to ensure a strong, viable future for the airport and its compatibility with the surrounding communities.
Alex, we appreciate your comments. And again, we look forward to a collaborative effort bringing aviation together with the FAA and the community to end up with an airport that the community supports. So to the extent that aviation interests are willing to help move through some of the potential obstacles that might arise over proceeding with our plan, through dialogue with the FAA, we certainly would appreciate that.
Great. Thank you so much, Peter. We're here to help, and we're here to join forces.
Thank you.
Okay. Unmuting next caller. Hello, caller ending 2617. You're on the air.
Hi, good afternoon, Peter, board members. This is John Carrain, both the Noyac Civic Council as well as the Southampton Town Aircraft Noise Committee. On behalf of my neighbors to your west and your neighbors to the west, I applaud your courage and conviction to stay the course on moving to this closure. The previous callers, notably both out-of-towners, both industry hired guns, they're fearful of what you're doing, because they know that what you're going to do is drive change and improvement. And in spite of their rhetoric for over a decade, all they do is advocate for the status quo. Fly Friendly has failed miserably. Noise mitigation has failed miserably. You know that from the tens of thousands of complaints lodged by resident taxpayers from Manhattan to the east end of Long Island on both forks. So I just want to thank you for your courage and conviction and the integrity under which you're running this process. I can't imagine the enormous pressure you're all under, but just personally on behalf of my neighbors, please, 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 just, you know, the kind of calls that was just preceded mine from helicopter operators and National Business Aviation, they don't have the best interest of the South Fork at all in mind. All they have is the convenience of a very, very small, well-heeled group of people who want to use and abuse our community. So I wish you well, stay healthy, and looking forward to seeing significant changes this season.
Thank you for calling, John. Appreciate your comments.
Unmuting the next caller. Caller ending 2866. You're on the air. Hello.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jacqueline Esposito from Springs. I'm calling about the airport today. I've largely sat on the sidelines, despite the fact that pretty much every morning I'm woken up at 6:45 by a local pilot, I assume he's local or she's local, who thinks it's a good idea to fly over people's homes at 6:45 a.m., not very neighborly. And ironically, in the time that you heard this presentation today, 3 aircraft came over our home, 2 helicopters, one so low that it just kept circling and my house vibrated, and a third, I'm not sure if it was a helicopter or a plane. In the short period of time that you heard this presentation today, 3 aircraft flew over, and at very low altitude. This is very common for Springs residents. So when you hear from aviation interests and they try to slander the people who live in Wainscott by saying, oh, they bought their houses at, by the airport, they get what they deserve. They bought their houses at a discount. Well, it reaches all the way to Springs. So this is not just Wainscott's problem. This is all of our problems. So if you're looking for neighborly solutions, number 1, don't fly over people's homes at 6:45 a.m. Number 2, don't fly your helicopters so low that we can actually see the colors on your helicopters. And number 3, to the aviation interests and their attorneys, East Hampton residents don't need your advice. What we need is for you to get it under control so that we can live in our homes in peace. I applaud the board for trying to work through this. I hope you take it further. Curfews are not going to be enough. You should ban helicopters, you should ban private jets, and you should let the small pilots fly their planes at reasonable hours that are not a nuisance to the neighbors. I hope that you'll have the courage to do that. I hope that you will not listen to the aviation interests, because clearly there's a lot of money driving these decisions. Thanks very much for your time. Have a good day.
Thanks for calling. Appreciate your comments, Jacqueline.
Okay. Unmuting next caller. Hello, caller ending 7563. You're on the air.
Good morning. This is Teresa McCaskey calling from the South Town Aircraft Noise Committee. Thank you for the presentation, Town Board. And I can only duplicate what was said by John Crane and the previous caller. Often we're being referred back to is noise. and they want to fly friendly, fly neighborly, et cetera, and so forth. It's not just noise that's the driving factor. The aquifer is number one issue. And the other issue, I just want to continue to bring up to the town board and remind them that not all helicopters are built the same way. So for if any callers are concerned about safety, this is also a safety issue. Some helicopters are not equipped with a crash-resistant fuel system or a fuel tank. So there is a complete list that's available for all the public and the town board to see on www.faa.gov. And on that, when you try to go into search box, look for helicopters, and there will be a complete list of which helicopters have a partially crash-resistant fuel system or a full one. And I will like to state very clearly that it seems to me that there's I could not find on any updated information that the Sikorsky S-76 is anywhere on that list, which is, again, provided by the FAA. So just wanted to point that out for everyone to take the opportunity to review that information and the reason why some of these helicopters are made that way. And listen, the aviation industry doesn't want to have to adjust their fuel tanks. They don't want to be forced to do it. Which is quite unfortunate. So flying safely, please, I agree, don't fly over our homes, don't fly over our schools, don't fly over our churches, don't fly even over our beaches. You want to fly out, there's a twin-engine Sikorsky, you fly 5 miles out off the coast of Long Island, because that's what those helicopters were originally built for, based on Rob Weissenthal's statement on CNBC, and he is, of course, the president or whatever CEO of Blade. So thank you very much for this opportunity to just mention to you and to the public to review that information, which is on a public site, and this is also a critical safety issue. So thank you very much for all your efforts and continue on. Thank you.
Thanks for calling, Teresa. Jason, do we have any other callers?
Yes, we do. Unmuting new caller. Hello, caller, ending 5337. You are on the air.
Hi, good morning. This is Bernadette Ruggiero calling from the East Hampton Airport. I'm calling in response to the caller earlier calling from the Springs, complaining about the aircraft over her house, and I just wanted to clarify that East Hampton Airport had one operation today that flew in over the ocean and landed over Wainscott and then into East Hampton. So we have not had any operations over the Springs or in any other region. Our runways are actually frozen. Thank you.
Thanks for calling, Bernadette.
Okay, and unmuting. We have one caller who has called back. If, with your permission, may I unmute?
Yes.
Hello, caller ending 9533. You're back on the air.
Hi, this is Margie Sorman, pilot and hangar owner out there at East Hampton Airport. I'm in travel right now. Echoing what Bernadette just said, that one operation today, yet H2O and all the aviators and all the helicopters and all the pilots are getting blamed for operations that aren't even subscribed to H2O. We still get the blame. We get the flyovers and the transversing of traffic and whatnot. There are a lot of the operations that are not even landing or taking off at H2O that are going to points northeast or wherever, and we still get the blame. And this is just typical of the deaf ear that you give to one group, and you are appeasing a very small vocal minority. There is definitely a noise problem, but it doesn't warrant closing the airport. And to deprive it of IFR operations, you already have the medevac imploring you not to close this airport and deprive it of its operations or what it provides the community in terms of safety and services. Years ago, you had committees where people who are complaining about noise would come together and sit on these committees where the aviators were only allowed to come in and listen, couldn't participate. And again, you have that same scenario operating today. You don't care to sit around the round table and solve this problem together. The five of you are going to make a monumental decision that is going to affect this community, and you're not listening to any of the actual community that is telling you, we do not want this airport closed. We do not want it deprived of IFR operation. And, if you really are interested in serving the public, which you're supposed to, not your own agenda, because you're all known anti-airport people, put it to a referendum. Ask the community what it wants. You are just simply telling the community what you're going to do after the fact. You're doing this PPR where you have no idea how it's really going to affect the community. Economically, it's going to impact it tremendously. Environmentally, sure, but you're not sitting around listening to any of the airport users, the community at large, the businesses that have called in. And then you have a very insulting, for aviation business associations that do call in on aviators' behalf, you get the insults that are slung just as before the few callers behind. Tens of thousands of calls of complaints, that's not accurate and you know it. It comes from a very select few of several households. It's on robocall, you know it. The very first number that you're given when you call the airport is lodge a complaint. Not the airport manager, not operations, not FBO, but how to file a complaint. You do nothing but promote the negativity of this airport, of which you are supposed to be stewards of. Your fiduciary duty is to the community, not to your own agenda, not to the vocal minority. There is a noise problem. There could be noise mitigating measures that could be implemented, but your only measure is to close it. And you know that you want permanent closure. And that's what you're striving for. And this thing goes well into the 2023, what you just presented to the board on the environmental impact statement and the draft that you have before you. But you always have it, if you're going to close it on the 28th, I say finish your work, sit around the table, listen to everybody, and solve the problem instead of you're hell-bent on closing this airport, and you know it.
Thanks for calling in, Margie. We appreciate your comments. I'll just have to say I don't agree with much of the characterization that you've made about what our intent is here. Our intent right now has been very clearly stated, and that is to keep the airport open, but to have an airport that reflects more of a balance within the community. And to the extent that aviation interests, many of whom we've listened to today, are willing to collaborate with us to get to that point, and others who have issues with the airport as it operates now can come together to constructively work on solving this problem, we will continue to have an airport. But we appreciate you calling.
But you're doing it to the point where you're cutting people out and just saying, well, on the 28th, we're going to close this thing. And you know darn well you're not going to be able to open it on the 4th.
Thanks for calling.
Margie, where do you live?
I live in Southampton, New York.
Thanks.
I've been in aviation most of my life, and so has my family. We make our living through aviation, and we have an outreach to the community and also to the youth who want to learn about aviation and become pilots themselves in any capacity that they choose, whether it be pilots, engineers, designers, what have you.
That's great.
Appreciate you taking the time out of your day to call us. Jason, do we have any other callers on the line?
Yes, we do. Unmuting next caller. Hello, caller ending 1728. You're on the air.
Thank you very much. Patricia Curry calling. I am a resident of the town of Southampton, and I wish I had the same faith that the previous caller has, that the town of East Hampton was going to close the airport. That is not what I'm hearing from the town board. I'm hearing loudly and clearly that they are looking into various means of containing some of the problems caused by the airport. The previous caller noted that she makes her living from aviation. Well, I'd like to mention that I make my living from my home, and my home has been assailed and assaulted by aircraft for 20 years, and I'm tired of it. And as to the number of complaints, it's not 10,000 complaints, it's tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of complaints over years. So I can only applaud that the town of East Hampton is at this point taking a step to do something about bringing around better conditions for all of us that live in this area. It's not only the people of East Hampton, it's the people in Southampton, on the North Fork, in Fire Island, along the coast of both North and South Shore, everybody, far into the cities of New York. People in the 5 boroughs of New York have been assaulted by helicopters coming out to KHTO. So I'd just like to say thank you to the members of the town board for the way you have proceeded and your careful consideration. And of course, I do hope that the airport will close on February 28th, and we wait to see what happens thereafter. Thank you very much for taking my comments.
Thanks for calling, Patricia. We appreciate it. Jason, any other callers?
On that note, we have no new callers.
Okay, in that case, we will move on now to our next agenda item. I want to thank Dan Redzo and AKRF and Lisa LeCurry, Peter Farrow, for the presentation today. We appreciate guiding us and the public through the next steps, and look forward to resolutions on Thursday.
Okay, thank you all. Appreciate your attentiveness and involvement. Thanks.
You well, take care. Our next discussion centers around proposed changes for street parking in downtown Montauk, and our Montauk liaison, Councilman David Lease, will be presenting for this discussion.
Thank you, Peter. Just give me one moment to close some of my windows. Yes, I want to thank the town board for the time to discuss this. For the last 2 years plus, I've been researching downtown Montauk parking. I started to do this just as not just an East Hampton resident, but the council member and the person that goes to the beaches a lot. More recently now, I've become the Montauk liaison to the town board for the Hamlet of Montauk, and also working with the Beach Advisory Group. That the impetus of the formation was during COVID, and in reaction to specifically executive orders that were put in place from the governor's office. I started becoming interested in the area of ditch planes mostly about 3 summers ago when they were jam-packed, and I had multiple discussions with Chief Sarlo about it. At that time, we were looking at ditch planes. The town board decided to make resident-only parking in ditch planes west just prior to that, and we also expanded the parking lot at the Ditch Witch parking lot, the old ED40 also. We expanded the parking there, so I wanted to thank the board at that time. I was always going out to Montauk to see how the summers are. I'm out there a whole lot, needless to say. I did a drive around with Chief Sarlo in that year. That was in 2019. He wanted to point out to the newbie town councilman, myself at that time, the trouble areas of Montauk. Chief Sarlo has a lot of history in Montauk, being the precinct commander at the time, and now our chief for getting close, I believe, 7 or 8 years. We pointed out areas that he'd like to see cleaned up specifically and primarily for public safety reasons. Sight lines, areas that should fall into DOT sight lines, areas that are being habitually parked on where there's fire hydrants and such, and just make sure that this area is to make sure we can get emergency access to. That fall of 2019, I started to work with the former town attorney, Jameson McWilliams, at looking at parking restrictions in downtown Montauk that were already in the code, specifically with a long-term look at it. We also did another drive around out of Montauk. We did that drive around, and then we did a deep dive into the code, pulling out the code, looking at all areas based on names that are in the downtown Montauk area, specifically downtown Montauk. And what we found was that there's areas in the code in which streets in which they currently still have 3 separate code restrictions written for them. And some of them have misspellings of the street names and a couple other inconsistencies that are the low-hanging fruit that we can change. But also we wanted to find out what was legally there in the town right-of-ways for parking. I then worked with IT, and what we did is we charted all of the parking restrictions from the town code, the current town code, in the town right-of-way onto a master chart. I did not include the municipal parking lots during this exercise in chart development, but I did make myself very familiar with every lot's current parking restrictions, which each parking lot has different restrictions, and they're all unique. I will now show and attach a chart here, if you don't mind, on the screen share, and I'll pull it back in a little bit. I developed that shows all the current restricted parking areas and a color-coded key line, which each one represents. If you don't mind, I'm just going to screen share 1 second. I hope this is coming up for everyone. Just please confirm.
There you go.
It's up.
Thank you very much. What we see is downtown Montauk area. We pulled out all the town code in which there's 1 hour parking, 2 hour parking, no parking 2 a.m. to 6 p.m. No parking in general, and permit parking. Primarily, as you can see in the downtown business central Hamlet area, there was parking regulations of 1 hour and 2 hour, and those are specific, for areas in which business needs business turnover of parking spaces. Commerce needs to have multiple people parking multiple spots, so there's multiple individuals that come and get their coffee, hardware, streetwear, whatever it may be. What we see in the far eastern section of Montauk over here, these areas of 2 hour parking were developed a lot within site plan review of parking areas in which they were put 2 hours parking by the planning board at the time. In the far western side here, you'll see South Eton and also the north side of South Emerson. There's multiple code. One has parking by permit only, one has no parking, and some of these areas have only parking up to certain areas, no parking into certain areas. So these are sections that we would like to look into. Some of the areas in the south eastern side here, we will see this is where the bathrooms at South Emerson are. By Nick's Beach, we want to call it South Edison, where we put no parking, and again, some more permit parking in certain sections. But there is a lot of area in which there's a lot of traffic and pedestrian flow. Now, what I want to do is let the board know there's 2 primary full sidewalks that go from the commercial district of Main Street, if you want to say Montauk, down to the beach, and they would be on South Edgemere, and it's on the eastern side of South Edgemere here. We recently installed a crosswalk here, and there is a southwalk that goes down South Essex into this area here, and 2. We do have infrastructure here, and our bathing beaches are located at Kirk in this area, also in the areas of downtown Montauk then too. I'm just going to stop screen sharing then and just go into some of my comments if you don't mind. I was prepared to discuss this with the town board in the spring of 2020 after doing some of this research, but then COVID hit and priorities changed from parking just to pretty much health, life, and safety for the town. For the summer of 2022 and into the beginning of 2021, the town had to decrease beach capacity in order to open the beaches. This was based on the executive order from the governor at the time, and then also we had to do that to get our beach operating permits. We had to do this with all of our beaches. Working with Chief Sarlo and members of the Beach Advisory Committee that was ad hoc formed at that time, we designed and designated areas in the town's right-of-way in downtown Montauk that were to be temporarily designated as no parking. This would decrease parking in those areas, but also the town board did not offer new non-resident beach parking permits at the time as another technique to decrease beach capacities, which we had an executive order to enforce. In all these areas, we put up barricades, which are on the town's right-of-way, that had no previous codified parking restrictions. And midway in early summer 2021, the town adjusted some of its temporary parking restrictions to allow as per allowances the New York State covers executive orders. The chief and I did an exit, and we determined that it was a good pilot program that year, even though COVID forced it, for increased public safety into that area, to potentially continue no parking in some of the areas into a second season potentially of 2021. We were looking at public safety and connectivity. This was actually a key discussion point in the downtown Montauk Hamlet studies about connectivity, pedestrian safety, and mobility in these areas. It was mentioned, I believe, in objective number 4. But even before the summer 2021 started, New York State executive order on decreased beach capacity was still in place. And again, working with EHPD, Town PD, and the Beach Advisory Group, certain areas in the Montauk right away were still deemed to be no parking zone. This changed in the middle of the season. We lifted certain areas of no parking, but we kept no parking in certain areas because it was seen to be as a good public safety aspect and public safety corridors. The areas that we did so, in which we put no parking, were between, I'm going to share my screen one more time on the same screen, was between South Embassy and also South Edison on the north side. So again, here, sorry, let me, on the north side of South Emerson, and also on this side, the western side of South Essex, where there is some parking up here, but in the lower section where there is a sidewalk, but no off-street parking, people are just parking in the berms, we actually ended up putting no parking in there too, and we continued that also. As we move forward into the discussion, Chief and I used these locations as areas that increased sight lines and also gave pedestrian areas to walk instead of being pushed into the roadways by cars that were parked in the right-of-way. That's just what happened in South Edgemere as individuals wanted to get to the beach from their cars or getting from the hotels to the comfort stations, vice versa. As I think the board is very well aware, it's a very highly pedestrian thoroughfare. Overall, it produced another summer of increased public safety and pedestrian connectivity, including some of the major destinations over the last 2 summers. And to my knowledge, there was no major incidents in these 2 seasons. And I do have to say that pedestrian safety was increased, and sight lines were also increased. At the same time, in the summer 2021, I looked globally at this, and I started working with John Rooney to assist me in researching solar-powered parking kiosks that could be used at Kirk Park, just in case that we didn't have the staffing to staff that location where we are now instituting paid parking. We worked with formerly Lauren Steinberg of Natural Resources to find appropriate solar-powered machines, and also EHPD to narrow the search for vendors that could provide the service for paid parking and work in sync with our traffic control officers to enforce, because there's no need to change parking or add new parking restrictions if you can't enforce it. The kiosks that we focused on at that time had online mobility capacity and price ranges that would work well and be able to be paid off within the PPU. These units, again, were easily to be installed because they would not need electricity, no need to increase infrastructure. Also, at the same time, we started to think about other locations for non-tax revenue in the town of East Hampton, and particularly downtown Montauk, very similar to what you're seeing in many other beach communities, and now most recently in some of the villages that surround or abut our town. Non-tax revenues, we looked at potentially implementing paid parking in the town's right-of-way in the beach area of downtown Montauk. I had discussions with the chief about multiple specific areas, maybe 4 or 5 of them, that paid parking might work. where there are no current restrictions in these areas, in areas that were mostly already pre-paved. So next, what we did is we then we felt that a form of parking restriction from 2 hours to permit parking were justified based on public safety and other existing parking restrictions. These potential changes are now going to be charted on a chart that I'm going to show you very shortly. What we did is we looked globally again at the parking plan in downtown Montauk, because we want to be very cognizant that any changes we made didn't shift the burden onto other areas in the hamlet or other property owners, business owners, and we made sure we looked at the global approach. Beginning of last spring was something that I thought I might be able to bring up to the Montauk CAC about this. I didn't get to it actually until just this fall. We've been talking about it, but again, the Montauk CAC had this discussion and they've seen these charts. I also had a ride around with our Superintendent of Highways, Steve Lynch and Terry Nesbitt, to get their opinion on some of the changes, as they have very good historical knowledge of these areas, and they were both in favor of these changes and discussed how the department could potentially assist in changing the right-of-way for any potential parking changes. The ride-around then led me into looking for future funding actions for this, potentially if need be, and discuss that with our budget director. Again, the summer of 2021, which that was, I abandoned that effort totally because it was too close and we're still dealing with COVID. A few months back in the early fall, I had to walk around with stakeholders in the Montauk area that included members of the Montauk Chamber of Commerce, adjoining property owners in the commercial district, to get their comments and concerns on some of these potential restrictions, and also thoughts about paid parking options. They were all in favor of the majority of the changes, but like to see more sidewalks on South Emerson for safety and connectivity. But understood that that was what was paramount down there. After setting the table of this, and also public safety, and then looking for non-tax revenue, I took these concerns to the Montauk CAC back in January, where I showed the potential parking plan I'm going to show you right now. And their Montauk parking subcommittee, which worked again with Sylvia a lot when the Montauk Hamlet studies, where they looked at some of these parking concerns, which they addressed in the Hamlet study, but they looked at it in the sole scope of parking, not necessarily one-way traffic or any traffic as of right now. On that parking committee also was Steve Klimnios, who owns many of the properties or helps manage many of the properties in that area, and he understood that, and he actually even expressed his interest in putting in a sidewalk in front of his businesses to help the connectivity then too. Overall, what I'm going to show you is a parking plan that was discussed in the Montauk CAC, also with other members. But again, we're looking for the Montauk CAC did put a resolution through. Okay, they reviewed it with their subcommittee, and the resolution, as I mentioned last week in my liaison report, is that they would support a 2-year pilot program of a kiosk paid parking on areas of South Edison and Elmwood, which I'm about to show you, to be addressed at the end of each year, provided that strong enforcement is put into place, and they would also like to see revenues from the pilot paid program to be segregated into a dedicated fund for the benefit of Montauk. What I'm going to show you right now is just a map here of some of the options. It's in one moment, everyone. I'm going to do another screen share here. Please let me know if this is coming through, everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, which one are you doing? The overall or the?
This is the proposal one. This is the one with.
We're seeing your first screen, I think.
Yeah. Well,
no, this is proposed. Yeah. Okay.
It is not proposed. I see it.
Thank you very much.
David, this is as January 10th, 2022.
Yep, that's right, Kate. Exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
So in this diagram here, it shows some of the new proposed areas that we would put no parking in the red checkered mark here. Again, these areas here on Essex, Elmwood, and then also Emerson are large pedestrian corridors in which we would put in no parking to increase safety and sight lines. Some of the areas that we would add in these dashed marks of 2-hour parking here, orange on Emery, north side of Edison, and some areas of Essex would be 2-hour parking that we would watch. We want to make sure we would want to address that now, so that any parking that would be moved to those areas would have a constant changeover for commerce and the businesses in that area. The one section of Edison over here in front of the church, I wouldn't mind be interested to give an allowance to members of that parish to, as they do, I know the Presbyterian Church in East Hampton Village, in which it can be Monday to Saturday, 2-hour parking, 9 to 5, and on Sunday, 2-hour parking from, let's say, 12 to 5, which is outside typical parish times on there. The biggest change on there, one of the biggest changes on here, would be 3 areas of the shoulder here that we would potentially add in paid parking areas, upwards of close to 27 to 35 spots, depending on parallel or head-in parking on here. And those are these areas here and 2. I'm going to forward one more to you to show what those areas might look like here. Again, if you can see this is the bathroom down at South Edison Beach, okay, where Nick's Sloppy Tuna, forget, Bounce maybe now. These spots are right here. There are about 19 spots that are already in place that are paved in the right-of-way, no parking restrictions. And then on the area of Elmwood here, there are also areas in the right-of-way that we can actually improve to put on more paid parking. To the right here, it shows the typical potential solar kiosk that can be installed in the springtime, removed at the fall, in which individuals could be directed to make a payment for a cost to be determined at this kiosk, or even through a very secure app also. I'm going to go back just one moment to, if you don't mind, to another screen, just to pull this up, just to get everyone. I'm going to screen share another time here. Is this coming up to everyone?
Yes.
I'm so sorry, I just get. Does this come up here for everyone? This is a street view?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the area I was talking about. Down here is the bathrooms, that's the beach. These are the parking spots that are in place here already. So that would be one area. Again, many people during the summertime, New York State traffic law, you have to stay, I believe, 15 feet from a corner, and also from, I think it's 20 feet from fire hydrant. Yeah. People park all on here all summer long. It's very dangerous. And there's going to be the other areas where you can see there's habitual use in the right of way also, and another area down here. You can see this is an area of 2-hour parking. But again, these would be the areas that we have discussed with property owners, also Chamber of Commerce, and also the Montauk CAC, and got their support for that. So I just wanted to let everyone see that as it looks right now. Just going back to my writing here. The potential let me just go back to the paid parking. The potential rollout of any paid parking would be based on the following. Conservative estimates right now would be looking to match the parking per day that we would do at our area Kirk, and conservative estimates could be about $40,000 to $45,000 of revenue that could be coming in from paid parking in those areas. I base that on a 50-day season, even though we know the season's a lot longer. The installation, the steps of this installation of 1 to 2 solar kiosks at these locations would accept credit card payments or an online application, parking application. We've been doing a lot of research in this with paid parking. Members of the public might, I know town board members know, but members of the public might also want to know that we already have paid parking in the town of East Hampton, and it's a pay by spot location. That's at the East Hampton Airport. So we actually have vendors that we've worked with for these type of payment options already. We will continue to look at those platforms for procurement, work through purchasing also, and make sure that specifically is the encryption of data is paramount here. The next one would be enforcement mechanisms. This is something that we've been working with PD on, potentially, and specifically Lieutenant Pete Powers and Chief Sarlon using IA technology to modernize our parking enforcement. We were looking at potentially outfit a TCO car specifically based in Montauk with license plate readers that would go around to check permits, time parking, paid parking. We put in different zones here the license plate readers that also are currently on PD cars, which we have one mobilized in Montauk all the time, would be able to potentially be used for this type of white marking of the tires, also to help in our enforcement. This will be another cost initially, but it should be paid within the first year based on what we can encapsulate in the sales of parking. This would also allow for greater efficiency of our parking enforcement on there to how we've been doing modernizing it by using a license plate reader to make sure our staff can continue to work in the downtown areas and get outreach to our beaches on there. It would allow for more regular enforcement, and also the case can't fill any TCO seasonal hires, a proactive patrolling of our parking areas, or a lot of times our TCOs go to a scene of an accident and then they don't get to enforce at that time. So license plate reader would just modernize it. The 2-hour areas of 2-hour parking restrictions would be constant turnover for commerce, as I mentioned, and within a lot of it's already been built into site plan reviews and recommended by the planning boards at those times. Again, I talked about the Sunday parishioners. I'd be interested to see if the board would be interested in doing 2-hour parkings in that stretch, a Monday to Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then from Sunday from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. to allow for that allowance in the morning. Again, overall, what we're looking to do right now, primarily, if we take out even the paid parking access aspect of right now, we're looking for pedestrian safety. This is within the Hamlet studies. It's one of the objectives is to greater pedestrian safety in sight lines while we're driving. We've had a couple seasons of this. It's been very successful on it. Again, it goes within objective number 4. It also will work within what parking would come under New York State DOT. And again, the long-term look is to add sidewalks in some of these areas, and then maybe I would like to look into adding maybe more parallel parking in front of those sidewalks. Any of the development of the paid parking or no parking would also still allow anyone to redevelop their property, because that right of way would then be looked at once again as the planning process would evolve at that time, and we can change it at that time. Again, we're looking to institute this immediately for the summer season, and again, it does not stop any private property person's rights from an application, and changes could be made based on recommendations of the planning board at that time. Lastly, Chief Sarlo is not available with us today. He's working with, he's doing other interviews. But primarily what I'm saying is that this is a statement for Chief Sarlo. The continued improvement of parking conditions and modernizing of our management of the commercial district flow and safety must continue to be addressed. Every commercial district in the resort beach area has to be balanced with timed parking, safe passage, and pedestrian of cars, and the ability to monitor regulations efficiently. These improvements and changes need to continue. Lastly, I'll go back to one last screen if you don't mind. Again, this is for discussion of the board, and this is just the last one here is our potential next steps. A continued discussion with the town board on the parking changes that I presented. Eventually, whatever might be the decision, if we decide to change anything, we would have to do a notice of public hearing for potential parking code changes. Procurement then later on, if we want to go to paid parking of a kiosk, building software, LPR, which I've already been looking at and got a lot of information. I'm going to continue to present to the board if the board is so inclined to move in this direction. We might have to do improvements in certain areas of the right-of-way as needed. And again, obviously, installation of the appropriate signage, which we are looking at currently right now of all our road and beach ends and in downtown Montauk to make sure signage is up to date and correct. So with that, I will go back to this shot of potential proposals for the town board just to discuss if that came up, and I look forward to, this is the one here, everyone. And that's my presentation. And I wanted to bring this to discussion to see if the town board supports some of these movements and this modernization. Do you have any questions or concerns?
David, I know this is this is something that's been discussed for quite some time, improving particularly pedestrian safety along that parallel street corridor of Emerson, South Emerson, as well as Essex. Those get a lot of heavy pedestrian traffic, and there's really, I think, an opportunity and then interest in trying to improve that for some time. So I'm supportive overall of the effort. I had and of potential paid parking in certain locations as well. I did have one question, whether there was any consideration for permit parking, residential permit parking, especially maybe in areas that are somewhat closer to the beach, because I do know that some town residents historically park in those areas where there is currently allowed parking.
Yes, I'm sorry if I didn't mention that. Yeah, so the paid parking would allow town permit parking at the paid parking also. I apologize if I didn't mention that.
Yeah, I think that's an important component because I don't think we want to, take away existing parking available to residents. So,
agreed. I'm sorry I didn't mention that.
Yeah, this is a very extensive and comprehensive effort that you've undertaken, David. I want to commend you for getting it to this point. I know you'd intended to bring it to us before, but as you said, priorities during the pandemic had changed, and we were, full on trying to, bring vaccinations and whatnot to the public. Probably going to take a little while to digest, I think, for board members. And so, with that being said, are there any immediate comments or questions regarding this presentation?
David, I just have a quick one. Down on Essex Street, all the way down next to below Surfside. So where you propose, I think there's a dotted line for now parking prohibited, but in front of that, I just want to mention there still would be permitted parking, town resident permitted parking on that green line down on Essex Street all the way down by the ocean.
Let me just pull it up for you here, Kate.
Yeah, it's below Surfside. It's on the east side.
Yes.
And I see you're proposing some prohibited parking areas, but in front of that or south of that, there's still town permitted parking, correct?
That is correct. That's still in the code in that section, on the eastern side of South Essex. That's still in the code. That won't be changed.
19 front end parking spaces there.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. I wanted to confirm that.
No, and again, we will be, 2 years ago when we had restricted parking, of course, we saw individuals parking in different areas. And so with this is something that, I will work along with East Hampton PD and members of the businesses to see how this affects their private properties, and we can tweak it from there. But it was a good starting point for the business community and the members of the Montauk that we can try this for this upcoming season, particularly 2 seasons, to see if the paid parking is good, but also we have to make any changes we can. But again, there's a certain time frame in which we can go through the public hearing process now and get ready and institute it for this summer season. It's a good balance, I think. Along with a lot of other things we do, there's not going to necessarily be a perfect Goldilocks moment where everything's just right. But we could try, and there a lot of background information went into this. So.
Okay. Well, thanks, David. We will give this quite a bit of consideration. There's a lot to digest here, and reconvene on the topic in the near future. That brings up our next agenda item, which is proposed amendments to Chapter 167, and that is littering. And we have Councilwoman Kathy Burke-Gonzalez and David McMaster, I believe, will be presenting that.
David's in the waiting room, if we could let him in, please. Great. Okay. So if I could just start. So the impetus for this was the reconstruction of County Road 41, which is Springs Fireplace Road.
As options to consider, recommendations included: 1, continue a regular sweeping and cleaning of Springs Fireplace Road by Town Highway Department, and I spoke to Steve Lynch, and they're doing that now once a week. 2, enforce existing county legislation prohibiting the deposit of waste materials, including dirt, sand, gravel, building materials, etc., from all county highways. That's section 433 of the county code. And 3, adopt a town law prohibiting dumping, depositing, throwing, placing of any soil, dirt, mud, sand, gravel, loam, building materials, construction debris, etc., on any public highway. Unfortunately, we were having issues with regard to local enforcement of drag out onto the county roads. So last week, John Dolnicki, David McMaster, and myself had a meeting with County Legislator Bridget Fleming and an attorney from the county, and I believe we finally found a path forward on how to address this issue on Suffolk County roads. So David, if you could take it from there, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, so the workaround that we came up with at our meeting last week is separate from the legislation that we're discussing today, but related. As you know, the town has an agreement with the county to provide road maintenance on the county roads located in the town of East Hampton. What we're proposing and what the county has agreed to do is an amendment to that agreement specifying that road maintenance includes enforcement of local litter and dump control laws on county roads. So to that end, today, we're proposing to expand the town's littering ordinance, which is Chapter 167, to include the same language that's in the Suffolk County Sanitary Code that really applies to what is colloquially known as drag out, which is a situation where debris, dirt, gravel gets tracked into the road from a property by vehicles that are coming and going. At a town level, we've gotten a number of complaints about this happening at different locations in the Springs Fireplace corridor. So if I could refer your attention to the materials that I circulated, it's Chapter 167. Under the definition of litter, subsection B would be expanded to include soil, loam, dirt, gravel, or sand. And then under section 167.2, we would add subsection D to read, no person shall permit any soil, loam, dirt, gravel, or sand from any source whatsoever, including lands under the control of said person, to be deposited, placed, tracked, or washed upon any public highway. And that would allow town code enforcement to cite property owners that are failing to really take steps to control the material from their property from being tracked onto the public road. There are a number of properties that are very good about this and proactive, that have measures in place. And what we're looking to do is try to bring everybody else on board. I think that all the town board members have driven down Springs Fireplace Road at various times and seen sand in the middle of the road or some other kind of debris. And this is an effective way to try to, prevent that and stop it from happening again in the future.
And to add to that, I mean, I've spoken to Steve Lynch and with Bridget Fleming, and the concern is also the drains, that drag out, that sand gets in the drains, and that's problematic. So David, I did, since we, noticed that we were having this discussion on for work session today and the materials went up on the website, I did get some questions about who would get the violation? Would it be the vehicle driver or the business? How does that work?
Well, this specific section, subsection D, I think really applies to the landowner, the person in control of the property. The subsection C of the same chapter refers to operators of vehicles. And I think that you could have a scenario where both parties are cited if it's, there's sufficient evidence in the eyes of the code enforcement person writing the ticket at the time. But really, I think that this is going to be a case where they monitor a specific property and see that, time after time, debris is being tracked out into the road and nothing is being done to mitigate the problem. This will give us a means to enforce that. And like Councilwoman Burke-Gonzalez said, to, take the burden off of the town drains. And we have an obligation to clean the road as per the agreement with the county. And I know that there is significant money just invested in the restoration and the redevelopment of that roadway in the past few years. So this is a good idea, I think.
So are we talking just county roads?
It's all roads, but this specifically, this conversation dealt with county roads because that's where the bulk of the complaints have come from and focused on. But we ran into the issue that much the same way when the town tried to change speed limits a couple years ago, and we were unable to do so on county roads, that we're not really able to enforce. Or we get superseded by the county, and there is a number of issues, and so this is really clarifying our ability to enforce on the county roads. But certainly, it applies to all roads in East Hampton, all public highways.
Right, and it's also my understanding, David, that right now the only places where we have the town code is in place is at construction sites, that there's no drag out allowed on construction sites. But so it's right now it's very narrow. And when I talked to Steve about this being on for today, he was, happy to hear that this would apply to other properties and not just be so narrowly defined.
Yes, I think that a lot of recent development has kind of addressed this in the planning stage, where the planning board has required the installation of preventative measures or bars or something that kind of stops the problem from happening before it starts. There could be, older commercial properties or, pre-existing non-conforming properties that didn't go through planning review that, are operating their business, but have been doing it for a while and kind of unchecked. I don't specifically know of any offhand, but I can imagine a scenario where someone missed having to go to planning board and so doesn't have any prophylactic measures and is contributing to the litter on the town roadway.
Do board members have any can address, but again, unless somebody calls to make them aware, they're not necessarily going to see that issue right away.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I do think contractors need to be informed. I mean, they may not particularly in this, well, as I said, I'm on a lot of residential streets when I'm driving here, but there's a lot of dirt and sand and gravel and stuff on the roads. So it's anecdotal, I understand, but still, I think these contractors need to be informed.
There's absolutely, I think that is true. They do deserve to be informed. Could also be a question if they're following their building protocols, right? Do they have the right fencing in place? Like how stringently are they abiding by the conditions for the construction, right? That's something that we'll have to investigate with the building department on for site-specific problems. But I think to the point about residential properties, this isn't going to be something where we go out and write a ticket to somebody that has like sand from the beach on their tires and a little bit goes out on the road. Like that's not the intent. The intent is for, I think significant debris that poses either a safety hazard or a burden on town drains.
Any other discussion on this topic before we move on?
Yeah, I would just like to thank Kathy for following up on this and with the county. This is something that has been impacting folks in Springs and anyone who uses County Road 41 and the businesses there as well. It's a safety issue, and I think this is a wonderful forward motion on this. I think it will cure a lot of the problems, and I was happy to hear David mention that there are mitigation measures that the businesses can put in to prevent the drag out, and I look forward to the difference on County Road 41, and I'm sure the spring CAC, I'll bring this to them at our meeting, and as they've had a subcommittee for a long time, as you know, Kathy, to look at this issue, and members who go down there and have adopted a road down there themselves to try to help will be very happy to hear of this development and this proposal.
And
So Kate,
as
now,
I understand, go ahead, Kathy.
Oh, I was just going to say, so Kate, that would be great if you could bring it to your spring CAC meeting and have them review it, and then we could notice it on March 3rd and potentially hear it on March 17th.
Yeah, I do want to say, well, thank you, Kathy, for doing this. I've worked with some folks, and with the drainage issue, it's a flooding issue is what happens. If people think it's, that the drainage, big deal, it is a big deal because the flooding then causes a lot of property damage. And that's one of the things that we're trying to certainly avoid here is the flooding that can be caused by all of this.
And again, as I understand it, this would apply to all roads within the town, not just the town-owned roads. So, there has been an issue out in Wainscott as well on 27 there by the pit. So
yeah,
that's another location that could be addressed by adopting this legislation. And I want to thank you, Kathy, for moving it to this stage. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Unless there's anything else on this topic, we can move on to the next proposed amendment to town parking, and that is regarding regulations on North Main Street. And as you heard, we did have one caller today.
So
Kathy and David are going to present on that as well.
Yeah, so one of the neighbors you heard from, Michael Mella, called in today that on North Main Street from Cedar Street to Indian Hill, there are posted signs that limit the parking to 2 hours. But what we've learned is that only Cedar Street to Miller Terrace is in the code. So somebody put those signs up and there's no code to back it up from Miller Terrace to Indian Hill. And the neighbors would like us to correct that. And I took this to the East Hampton CAC earlier this month, and the CAC was supportive of, rectifying it. So David, if you want to take us through.
Yes, so the town code section in question here is chapter 248, and this specific section, as Kathy said, is time restrictions at certain locations. So in the chart that's in the materials, there's 2 entries for North Main Street on the east side of North Main Street, and then also on the west side of North Main Street. The proposed change would apply to the west side of North Main Street from the southwest corner of Indian Hill Road to the northwest corner of Miller Terrace. And the restriction would be consistent with what the signage is and what's on the rest of the street. And that's 2-hour parking from 9 a.m. To 5 p.m. And that's really it. There's a diagram that was included in the materials that shows the proposed area in question. And I think it's good. I can't see of any reason why this section of North Main Street would be excluded from that regulation. And I must just have to think it was an oversight because the signs have been up for some period of time in this area. It just hasn't been backed by the code.
If everybody's in agreement, David, I'd like to get noticed this Thursday, if that's doable, to get a resolution in before 11 o'clock tomorrow. That would be great.
Just to answer, I completely agree with this one here. It seems like this is an oversight that never got matched. So even if it was ticketed, it would be thrown out. So to match what the signage and what the use is, I think it's good portion of the code. It comes back to the last conversation is about enforcement. and make sure that we can have our traffic control officers in that location. And sometimes it's difficult, but maybe again with different new techniques and modernization of our parking, that we can rigorously enforce it too. But yes, I think it's smart.
Thank you, David, so much. Do we have Tom Rule in the waiting room? Jason?
Can you say that again? It's actually Matt here. Sorry.
Do we have Tom Rule? Is he in the waiting room?
Sorry about that. He's admitted.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to Springs Library ADA renovations. And I'll share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, here we have beautiful Springs Library. That tree, which you see to the left, has been removed due to the fact the lower portion of it was entirely hollow. It's amazing that a tree of that mass could be supported by what was essentially bark and maybe an inch or so of wood. The rest of the entirety of that was hollow. Luckily, it did not fall and crush the house. It's quite a big tree. It's sad to see it go, but we're looking to continue our path of renovating and bringing the Springs Library building up to date. We're in the process of replacing the roof and doing chimney work on this structure. The property was the former home of Ambrose Parsons, who built the structure in the late 1700s. It was rebuilt after several fires in 1851. And we purchased the house, the town purchased the house from the Elizabeth Parker's estate back in 1976. Elizabeth Parker, the last resident of the house, is well known for her contribution to the abstract expressionist movement, or at least until lately was maybe not as well known. Behind me is one example of her work. The house did have within it a whole collection of her artwork, which has been removed from the house and is in a climate-controlled area now. The property was made available through a partnership with Springs Historical Society from the 70s on right through till today. Part of the ongoing effort of the town is to bring all of our buildings up to ADA compliance, and the front walkway is not ADA compliant, nor the entrance, and the existing ADA ramp in the back is in poor repair. This shows crosshatch areas of the walkway that would be removed and the ramp to be removed. And this is the site plan for the new walkway and accesses. This would be a concrete sidewalk that has a veneer of brick pavers over it in keeping with the historic district. This is right in the heart of the Springs Historic District. The front stoop would be somewhat reconfigured, and the ADA ramp would be in this U shape going around the back, the length of which is determined by the elevation that has to be reached, and a no more than 1 in 12 pitch, so no more than 1 inch of rise for every 12 inches of run. Here is a cross section. You can see the dotted line is the existing grade. So it's not a great deal of elevation that needs to be made up, but enough to require that. This shows a floor plan of the library, the front being at the top of the screen. And these actually three doorways would have to be reconfigured here to allow for a clearance of a wheelchair. This is the existing bathroom, which is not compliant. This photograph shows those doorways being changed to 3 foot, and that the configuration within the bathroom, allowing for this 60-inch diameter turning space, which is a requirement of ADA, so the wheelchair can be navigated within. Obviously, the sink then would not be a pedestal or cabinet style vanity, but would be a freestanding wall-mounted sink, so that it would accommodate the wheelchair as well. So the funding for this is recommended to come out of the Americans with Disability budget line, which there is about $246,000 remaining. This fund will also be increased by another $250,000 if approved in the capital plan this year, with subsequent years also having an additional $250,000. Today, we've had a number of projects on various town buildings to improve access for those with disabilities. The overall improvement funding for the library that's not related to ADA, we bonded $200,000 in 2020 and another $100,000 in 2021. And I believe there's a remaining $93,000 left at this time unencumbered with the current project of upgrading the roof and chimneys. There is a great deal of work that can still be done on the property. The windows are in need of work, and so we will continue to address all of these, but we wanted to prioritize the access issue first. And so that's essentially it. So we have a proposal with plans and specs from Drew Bennett. If the board is supportive, I would like to get that out to bid as soon as possible. We currently have Ron Webb, I think, is doing the roof on the property. They're moving along with progress to their work. If we put this out to bid soon, there may be some economies in that he's already staged on the property and may give a lower bid than somebody who hasn't yet staged. But in any case, we'll go through our regular procurement process, but I would like to see if the board had any concerns or questions. And if not, we can go out for a bid as soon as possible. Any comments or questions from the board?
No, I think it's a long time coming. I know the Property Management Committee has been looking at this. I think, again, it shows our commitment to our historical structures and to the Springs Historical Society. The only thing I know I mentioned earlier is simple. I think we should add an outdoor spigot if we're already doing the plumbing. That would help. But overall, the plans by Drew Bennett look good to me. Thank you for presenting.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comment, David. I think that if we're going to be reconfiguring plumbing, it makes sense to put a frost-free hose bib to the outdoors from that bathroom location, so that if somebody needs to water plants or whatever, that can be done. And we have Tom Rule, who's our in charge of. He's our ADA officer. Tom, did you have any comments or concerns about the plan?
The only small detail I would add that Boston, which is a bastion of historic preservation, there have been protests against using bricks for your sidewalk access, and the issue is that bricks, unless studiously maintained, can become uneven, bouncy, and otherwise problematic. But they're certainly not banned by ADA. ADA just sets the standard of a smooth surface for ADA compliance. The question that is raised in Boston is a number of advocates for the disabled have said their sidewalks aren't smooth because of the nature of bricks and settling and water getting in between cracks and ice forming and corners raising, and so they require, in order to stay a smooth surface, they do require additional maintenance.
Yeah, and I think that that's a key point that you bring up. It really has to do with what the initial installation is, and I know, for instance, in the village, and I believe even on 27 in Amagansett, those brick portions are placed in sand and on stone dust and sand, and because of rain and frost cycles and whatnot, they can become uneven. And we even had some issues here at Town Hall because originally they placed those pavers leading to the entrance to Town Hall in sand, and that causes them to become uneven. We since corrected that by putting them directly into concrete and thereby having a base. So they become a veneer on a concrete substrate, which is pretty much impervious to those types of changes. So
that is the best practice of construction for ADA, is to have them with that sub base, which the town has.
And I just want to make the board aware that that is the case in this design, that the bricks are set as a veneer on a concrete sidewalk, and thereby are not susceptible to the kind of environmental changes and irregularities that you're speaking to.
And it's also best practice to get what's called wire cut. And I will tell you that I'm not an expert on that, but I believe because that allows the bricks to be as close as possible together and minimizing the, and as Drew has put in the specs, to make put the sand in between gives you the closest possible smooth.
Right, as opposed to a grout joint, which could be a little bumpier.
Yes.
But again, not as much of an impediment as just placed loose sand.
So we have a disability advisory board meeting on Friday, which will discuss this plan. But in the meantime, I sent all the documents for today to them to review, and Tom will be taking them through the plans this Friday.
Yeah, this was reviewed by the Town Property Management Committee, and Glenn Hall, who's the chair of the Disabilities Committee, is on our committee and has reviewed it as well. And I believe he had said that he had circulated it to members and that there was support for this. So are you saying you'd like to delay the?
I hate to delay, but I do have I saw an email from Glenn that said he hadn't seen the plans. So
I just discussed it with him and he said he had, so.
Okay.
And he's been in the committee meeting, so I don't quite, I mean, we could put it off if you want for another couple of weeks and we'll get to.
Yeah, I hate to do that. But is it possible
Because we really were hoping to get this done before the season, and I just know how time slips away, but.
Could we notice it on Thursday, but have the bid available the following week, so that just if there's any comments, they could be incorporated?
I'm sure we could do that.
So we don't lose the cycle of noticing the RFP.
Yeah, I mean, we've had it designed by an engineer. It's been reviewed by our ADA officer, and the chair of the disabilities has already said he's supportive of the plan. But, if you'd be more comfortable waiting until your committee has a look at it, then we could, can we do that? Can we notice that for bid a week out? So,
yeah, I mean, we do that all the time. Jeannie does that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, if we notice it on Thursday, they can actually release the bid the next Wednesday or such.
Yeah.
It'd still keep us in the queue for summertime. I agree with you, Peter, to get it done by summer.
You know how time slips away, and we don't know. We had multiple issues with trying to get the roof bid where, trying to find somebody, first of all, to bid on the project when there's so much lucrative work out there. And then second of all, you have a willing contractor who's been certified to do the initial work, and there may be some economies available in cost because he's already staged on the project. But well, let's do that then. Kathy, you want to bring that to your committee and have discussion? Let us know if there are any further comments, and we'll go ahead and Thursday have a resolution to schedule it with it going out after your. Okay, that wraps up our agenda topics for discussion. And that brings us to liaison reports.
So I just wanted to mention, everybody knows yesterday was Valentine's Day, and of course they celebrated it at the senior center, and the site council provided chocolate and handed it out to everybody, and they had a very enjoyable luncheon yesterday. Special events committee, you remember at the February 1st work session, we discussed the special event process. And then at last week's meeting, we reviewed code changes to Chapter 151 special events. There were a few, tweaks that we still needed to make, namely adding in the definition of a rush fee, tightening up the language concerning carry in, carry out. And then we talked about, we talked about, we went back and forth on the cleanup deposit, that we didn't really need one, didn't want one in effect for smaller parties. And then Carol had made the case to, eliminate it altogether. And what the town attorney's office is recommending is that we leave it in the code, but we waive the cleanup deposit by town resolution to give us flexibility, so that if it doesn't work out and we decide that, we need to have a cleanup deposit in place, then it's in the code. So I think that makes the most sense. If other board members will agree, David could then, McMaster could circulate the final today, and we could notice it for public hearing this Thursday. And then later today, I'll, in this meeting, I'll have a resolution to approve the St. Patrick's Day festivities here in the town, the Friends of Erin Parade in Montauk, and the Amagansett Parade down in the middle of town there. The YMCA Board of Managers met last week. Their membership is strong. Their preteen program is picking up. Some of their classes have returned. They're adding new classes. And I do want to say that, because we've got a couple of capital projects going forth. We're in the engineering for the new roof, and for the HVAC system, we're also replacing 3, I believe, original exterior doors. And the process that we have in place now with Severo, Christopich, and Kevin Ahern, taking the lead and, running point on capital projects is really working beautifully. It's increased efficiency, it's improved communication, and I'm really, grateful that we're at that place. I see that John had to step out for a meeting. I was going to have him give us an update on the status of the contract with R2 Architecture, because I know we're biting at the bit to get started on the community engagement for the new senior center. And, since this is a major project, I think we bonded $1.8 million. There's been a lot of back and forth on that contract. And from what he tells me as of this morning, we're really, really close. So once that gets signed and executed, then we're free to schedule, to organize the community engagement. So I asked the community to, stay tuned. Last week, we talked in my liaison report about the Springs Park, and I had mentioned that, the signs had gone up, but we've been waiting. We have a gate company on contract, and it was a long wait to get a proposal from them for the double gate. And we just got the proposal. It totals $6,284. So Scott Wilson has amended the CPF management and stewardship plan so that we can incorporate that project, because he's going to be noticing that plan for public hearing this Thursday. So what the how the plan is going to read now, it's going to say, at the recommendation of the Springs Park Committee and to enhance access to the park in a safe and orderly manner, the town received a bid to upgrade the access gates for the park, equaling $6,284. So that, Scott, believes, and as do I, that, it is fitting to use CPF money to improve access there. So it's always nice when we have a funding mechanism in place. So that'll be, in the project plan that gets noticed on Thursday. That's what I have for today.
Thank you, Kathy. David, do you have a report for us?
I do. It's a pretty short one today. The Nature Preserve Committee met last week. We discussed some of the maintenance reports. We want to let the public know that New York State has been actively felling trees on Nbaa stretch in the areas with the southern pine beetle. That would be actually, they were on Friday and they started working this week again also. So there's active felling happening there. So you might see some changes to the ecology because of the infestation. We were discussing some management plans that were outstanding. One of them was actually, we're looking still at Rod's Valley, the management plan to try to address nighttime, an increasing nighttime use of fishing pier there for lighted fishing on there. So we're going to continue to bring that back up in the next month to bring back to the town board. We discussed actually, there was 3 management plans I know the board we've discussed already, but I wanted to see if the board would like to try to move forward in March with 2 of the management plans to a public hearing. That would be for Gold Dart and also for Fresh Pond Meadows, the former pedestrian pit down in that area. The other management plan would be for the one for the former 555 property, which I think we can bring back maybe to a work session for some more discussion. So I wanted to see if the board would be okay with me scheduling the Gold Dart one and the Fresh Pond Meadows. I'll forward it on again, but so just reply to that. It'd be nice to get those ones in the queue to get approved prior to the summer season. Let me see here. What else do I have on here? We will actually have on a notice of public hearing I have coming for this Thursday. This is for the road improvement district in Montauk at the intersection in front of the Rough Rider area over by Avalon and close enough to the Montauk train station on there. We did that in a public hearing, so I'll have that on for scheduling that public hearing. Again, the road improvement district, any improvements to that area would be burdened and paid for by residents of the Rough Rider condominium district, but it would then be a road that would be taken into the public entity. Let me see here. The rental registry, I know we addressed the rental, some potential changes to seasonal rental registries as allowed in by state enabling legislation. Jen Nigro, I know, got some more information back to the board on that, confirming that yes, it is 120 days per year. That's the structure itself. The dwelling cannot be rented as a seasonal use dwelling for more than 120 days. Some of the information about the tenants, yes, that has to be spelled out and given as part of any seasonal rental registry, part of the New York State legislation. So we would have to abide by those terms. Again, some of that information would be redacted if needed, if requested, excuse me. But we are pretty much bound by what the goal put forward unless there was any type of change to the state legislation, which I wouldn't anticipate happening anytime prior to the summer season. I know the Village of East Hampton is looking to move forward with theirs. They don't have a rental registry law, so they're putting it forward very shortly. So I wanted to bring that back to the town board. If you had any more questions or concerns on that, knowing the timings of the essence, I will send me any comments. It'd be nice to maybe see if we could still public hear that for notice the public hearing on March 3rd. So maybe we can work that through in the next week and let me know any concerns. We can move forward on that first week in March.
David, did we get the village proposal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed it. I'll go back.
I'll resend that around then too. We did get that again. Remember, they don't have a seasonal rental registry, so they're changing that. Specifically, what they're doing is they're limiting it to Memorial Day to Labor Day.
Yep.
It ends up being a little bit more restrictive, if you want to say. But what we can do is still put something forward that matches what the state legislation is and do it in a time frame that would be beneficial to the industries of real estate and homeowners also. And it was short, and I do have to say, to probably none of my friends that are watching right now, because most of them are working, it was very nice to see the classes surrounding the class of East Hampton High School, 1994, 93, 92, a little later, 95, this weekend, and at the memorials of one of our close departed friends. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Sylvia, do you have a report for us?
I do. So the anti-bias task force met. The discussion kind of centered around the pandemic, how it had impacted sort of their social interaction with the community. And they're hoping to improve that social interaction this coming spring and summer. So they had some short-term goals that they would like to hopefully move forward with. And one would be this spring partnering with another organization for a Cinco de Mayo celebration. And the other would be a planned picnic. In 2020, they had already started planning for a picnic at the Farm Museum, and because of COVID, they couldn't move forward with it. So they'd like to move forward with it now and have it in conjunction with Juneteenth. And so work with, the planners of the Juneteenth celebration, and they would like to become part of that, and hopefully with a picnic at the Farm Museum. We also had Spring Supervisor Deborah Winter on our call, and she pointed out that a project at Spring School was a participation in a New York statewide event honoring Dr. Martin Luther King. And it is still online. If anyone wants that, they can go to a particular website, and if they call my office, I'll be able to give the website. It was a virtual art show, and pairing with Martin Luther King's 6 principles of discussions. They also talked about, also the Spring School is going to receive a proclamation for their participation and their submission to the state about Martin Luther King. And that proclamation will be presented on March 16th at the Spring School by Assemblyman Fred Thiel. If you want to be present, you need to call my office and we'll make arrangements. They also discussed housing, and they would like to have a presence on any issues moving forward with housing conversations. Speaking of housing, the Community Housing Opportunity Fund also met. They're going to present a formal memo to the town about recommendations for the 0.5% transfer tax, including single family, seasonal housing, rentals, et cetera, down payment assistance, buybacks, a lot of different things that we've already discussed, just thrown out there to see what might work for the 5%, the 0.5% transfer tax. They'd like to formalize some of their conversation and ideas. Also wanted to know about updating the housing plan. So the housing plan was updated as part of our code. We need to update it every 5 years at the very least. We updated it in 2015, then we updated it again as an addendum in 2018. And it's time for us to update that again. We want to know with the town board, how are we going to integrate that updated plan with the plan of the 0.5% spending? So it's really the planning department, along with some members of the Community Housing Opportunity Fund Committee, really worked on that plan in 2015. I'll give a lot of credit to Eric Shantz for moving that along. It's got a lot of demographics, data, information that's needed for educational purposes. I'm not sure it's something that we want to put in the 0.5% plan itself, but it could be it's an educational tool, I think. And I want to know how to use our time wisely, so that we're not spending, time on either 2 parallel tracks, or if we need to work together in getting both of these done at the same time. So that's really kind of I'm asking the town board for some guidance on how they see using an updated plan, and how they, and the plan that has to be written for the community to vote on for the 0.5% transfer tax in November of this year. We can talk about it now or at different times. Anybody?
I'd just like to, before we talk about it, add in my liaison report, I was going to put it at the end, but I attended the East Hampton School District intra-district meeting. And maybe before we talk about it, I'll just say when we get to my liaison report, just indicate some of the topics that were interest to them in regards to the housing plan as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, progress is being made on formulating that committee that will, help develop the community housing fund plan. And I may have a resolution as early as Thursday, but that will include a number of different people with various backgrounds that will be helpful, I think, in representing the community, including local school board member. So there will be some cross-pollination, if you will. And I think that's important that we bring, all assets to bear and have comments from a wide spectrum of the community to help address this issue. So I look forward to that.
So Peter, I'll talk with you separately because it's very intensive to try to get all the data pulled together. We just had a census in 2020. Our demographics have certainly changed since we even updated it in 2018. So if, I don't want to have information not useful. So if we need to use this information and update and put some time and effort into it, it's the planning department that'll be working on it. Maybe I want to make sure that they have the right direction, and being able to work with the group that you're going to put together as well. So I'll talk to you, about that.
Thank you.
I just want to remind folks, there's a public hearing on 417 about the affordable housing overlays. On 114, there are 3 separate properties that we're looking at, and also changes to affordable housing overlay for single family houses at 4 per acre versus 2 per acre. And so those are coming up in March, and look forward to hearing from the public. The new chair of the ARB, Kathleen Cunningham, is putting together a training session at the planning department for ARB members, and really thank her for getting that. She's got herself as a new member and another new member, and working, with the planning department in revamping the website and the page for the ARB, making sure that information is all up to date and current. And she's also looking with Eric Shantz and Jeremy Samuelson from the planning department, looking to make sure that the application forms are consistent with what's happening in the planning application forms as well. And so that they work better together. There have been some things that might be considered miscommunication between those 2 areas. And she wants to make sure that they're brought into to be better aligned, but working with the planning department to get that done. And Arts Council also met. We have been partnering with East Hampton High School for their March Madness for, I think, 4 or 5 years. We have skipped 1 year because of COVID. So we are again doing March Madness. It's on March the 17th. This is an art project where the different classes compete with each other, and they do it through the art department. So I want to thank Tony Littman for making sure that the boards are sent. The town puts together these huge 4 feet by 4 feet boards. They're primed and they're ready to hang with big cleats on the back of them. And they're given to each group, each class, and they're given a set of instructions from Heather Evans, who's the art teacher, and they compete, and then they judge. They complete the boards, and then they're judged, and the members of the art council will be some of the judges that will judge and give a first, second, and third place. All of the ones that have been done in the past are at the school and up on the hallways, so you can see them, and they really do provide some brightness to what could be considered some sort of drab hallways in the high school. And we did talk about Brooks Park. We have several members of the council that are members of Brooks Park. And they are doing a walk of the Brooks Park property with the Trails Preservation Society coming up on Sunday the 20th. They want to also look at continuing their creative networking nights coming this spring and summer. So they usually did that at off-campus locations, and so that's to be continued, but they would like to get back to doing some of that socialization as well. So looking forward to a better summer. And that's it.
Thank you, Sylvia. Kate, do you have a report for us?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Peter. And I'll jump right into that East Hampton School District Inter-District Housing Committee meeting that I attended on the 10th. There were representatives and the superintendents from East Hampton, Springs, Sag Harbor, Amagansett, and Montauk present there. It was moderated by the principal, Adam Fine, and Jackie Lowry and Christine DeSantis. They were enumerating, and this was their inaugural meeting of this committee, that they will keep going. And they were talking about hiring and in the past how teachers who have been there for 10 years, and when they hired them, the drive was accepted as part of the job, and people were more inclined to stay on the job for a long time. But now as the younger hires come in, they're not so inclined to continue that. The commute is very much working against their hiring, and if they get to hire people, they're not staying very long. So while the teachers have been there longer, it's an accepted practice, an accepted part of the job to have this commute. They're really having difficulty with younger hires and newer hires, either getting them and keeping them. So they're worried that in 10 years, it'll be impossible for them to hire. They are sharing ideas across the districts for housing opportunities. They would like the town to take a look at the accessory housing codes that we have now, and I know Peter, you also want to take a hard look at those to see how we can tweak them to make them better and be used more. Of course, looking through our own properties to build on, they don't particularly want to be in the housing business. They're in the teaching business, but they're looking for ways that they can help with the school-owned properties. Adam Fine talked about having the districts work together. We talked about them combining to do purchasing and other types of activities that they can do as a group rather than as separate districts. And he'd like to work together on hiring standards and making getting candidates, as he put it, past the canal. They also are thinking of ways to keep teachers. They feel that teachers, and it's not just teachers, it's all their staff members. From the teachers to the administration to the custodians that keep the buildings going, to bus drivers. They are in a crisis of hiring, and they're thinking what different types of housing works for who, and they feel like houses work for a teacher who you want to invest 30 plus years in the community, and they would like to raise their families here. So that's one of their comments on the types of housing. They also would like to point out that the train service now is critical, that we're running, and that last mile transportation has been really, really helpful to the teachers that live out of town. They would hate to lose that. It would really impact them. And they're just would like the public to realize that, rentals going at $5,000 a month now are equal to what the teachers make a year. So this issue becomes more critical every year. They are going to provide us, they're going to take a look through their data to see how long they retain teachers, where the teachers are coming from, to help us understand what's happening in their world in terms of data they can provide us to help us with our decision making. It was a great meeting, and I look forward to continuing meeting with all of the school districts. The next topic is South Fork Wind Farm. I would like to, I'm sure everyone has been aware of the groundbreaking ceremony. I'll leave that to the supervisor to talk about more in depth. I would just like to say that the residents of Wainscott were concerned about an Army Corps permit not being up on the state website and have been making sure that the town received it. We have received that permit in its entirety, and it is up on the state aggregating website if anybody would like to see that. We'll be getting by the end of the week a chart with their well sampling. We also, their wells, I can say the placement of the wells are in conformance with our easement agreement. Construction will start in the next few weeks. We will have the sampling data before the construction starts. On that project, I continue to ask the public to, with any concerns, comments, complaints, to reach out to South Fork Wind at info@southforkwind.com, and please CC me at my town address, or just simply write or call to me, and I'll make sure I'll forward their information. The next project is the Old Stone Highway Bridge, which I briefly mentioned before. Our consultants from Savick and Murray, Jim Peterman, and our own highway supervisor, Kevin Ahern, have gone out and inspected the bridge recently at low tide. They have photographs, and they are prepared to put together a construction protocol for us. And I'll be doing a presentation on that in the near future. I also, after our special events committee, Kathy had asked for a subcommittee to work on specific commercial activities on the beaches and special events frequencies at commercial venues. We had our first meeting, and we're looking into that, which was part of the presentation on special events overall. And in the future, the next week or two, I'll be meeting with the Energy Sustainability Committee, the Coastal Assessment and Resiliency Committee, the Waterfront Advisory Committee, and the Wildlife Management Committee. We'll be having our meetings. And I have one event I'd like to inform the town board and the public about. The Springs Historical Society and Community Library are presenting their Arthur's Night series is set to begin. The first evening will be February 16th, tomorrow evening at Ashwell Hall at 6 p.m. Admission is free. And Jeannie Henderson will be the premier author. She will screen a short historic film about the Hurricane of '38 prior to speaking about and reading from her book, A Day Like No Other, which tells the story A Day Like Any Other, which tells the story of that devastating storm, and there'll be a Q&A after the talk. And I look forward to attending that first meeting and getting back to these events that are so interesting to us. And then there will be additional authors' nights will be announced. And that's my report.
Thanks, Kate. That book by Jeannie Henderson is a good read, and if you get a chance to read it, I do recommend it. It has a lot of local characters. You'll recognize them, even though this is separated by, pushing 100 years now almost. There are still people around town like this, and it's definitely worth the read. Very enjoyable. Thank you, Kate. I'm going to start by reporting on COVID update, and I'm very pleased to announce that the positivity rate in East Hampton at our testing site has gone down yet again. The previous dates I reported on were January 31st through February 6th. 99 people tested, a 4.04 positivity rate. The last report we have is from February 7th through the 13th. It is 1.23%. This is extremely encouraging news, and I think it's, the result of certainly the holiday surge is over, but people continuing to wear masks and be careful will continue to help. We will continue to offer vaccines. There will be a vaccine event tomorrow here from 9 to 4, the medical RV. There'll be COVID testing and flu vaccines available. We have February 22nd from 4 to 8th. We'll have vaccines here at Town Hall. I've been able to procure 2,000 home test kits for COVID from Suffolk County. I want to thank the county executive, Steve Ballone, for that. We're limiting 2 boxes per household. That's a total of 4 tests. They have an expiration date of May of 2022. We're distributing them here today at Town Hall from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So just about done distributing today. They're also being distributed at Human Services on Springs Fireplace Road, 128 Springs Fireplace on Friday, February 18th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we're distributing during the day on Tuesday here at Town Hall, Tuesday, February 22nd, actually during the late afternoon. We also, that coincides with our next vaccination clinic, February 22nd from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. You'll be able to pick up test kits or get vaccinated or both, depending on what your needs are. I've also arranged for distribution in Montauk through the Montauk Chamber of these same tests. The governor has announced an extension of the suspension of open meetings law that extends through March 16th. So we will continue remote meetings at least until that time. Last Thursday, the 10th, the governor did lift the statewide mandate for masks indoors at any facility or business. That has been lifted. Business owners are free to continue to impose on their own properties a requirement to wear masks. The town, for the time being, has decided to do that at all town facilities. We will again review the new data that we've gotten in regarding the positivity rate within the town's testing. We'll look at Suffolk County's testing and the number per 100,000 of tests, and as that relates to the CDC guidance, and make a determination as to when we might lift a mask requirement for town facilities. We're going to continue to look at that and try and do what's best to keep the public and our employees safe. As I mentioned earlier, making progress on formulating a committee to work on the draft community housing fund plan. This relates to the 0.5% transfer tax, similar to the CPF fund, as a funding source for community housing. And, we believe this is a really important tool in addressing the affordable housing crisis here in town and elsewhere in the 5 towns. And again, prior to that going to a public referendum to be voted on by the public, we need to put together a plan and submit it and widely distribute it, have discussions about it, and ahead of that vote in November. We'll be having a presentation mid-March on the wireless code revisions that are being proposed. We'll circulate that to board members ahead of the work session, and then have a public discussion about it. We have been talking about creating one new dedicated code chapter just for wireless, and removing all the references within the zoning code. They're scattered throughout chapter 255. We think it makes more sense to have them all consolidated in one location, and with the land use boards still retaining authority over applications. As Kate mentioned, we do have a significant event here in town on Friday. That was the ceremonial groundbreaking for a South Fork wind farm, offshore wind farm, the very first offshore wind farm in New York's history. We had the very Honorable Governor Kathy Hochul with us for that groundbreaking, and also the Secretary of the Interior, U.S. Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, and a number of other notables, including all of our town board members and our trustees. It was a terrific event, hosted at LTV, and I think people may not realize just how important this is. to our town and to our state and to our country and to the world, really. Moving forward with renewable energy, reducing pollution, greenhouse gases will do nothing but to improve our quality of life, protect our environment, and our sustainability here on the planet. This one project alone will provide electricity for over 70,000 homes, which is essentially the entire South Fork. It's about that number of homes, and will be the equivalent reduction of carbon inputs in fossil fuel emissions equal to about 60,000 automobiles. So, a small step like this for one community, a bigger step for our state. I know the governor has committed $500 million to developing renewable offshore wind resources within the state. This will bolster our economy and bring new clean energy to all of us, which is so important. I want to also say that we have had a solarized program here in town. We've had, I think, over 165 people, residences and businesses, place solar panels on their roofs, producing clean electricity. I did this back in 2018 and have produced more electricity than I've used over that period of time, saving an average of about $5,000 a year off utility bills. This is something that you can do if you contact our Natural Resources Department. They'll be happy to help you. We have a local contractor, Green Logic, who won a competitive bid to provide solar panels for home use and businesses at very competitive rates. I want to say that just since our press release went out, that we've seen this increase in interest in the last couple of years, and just since press release went out, we had 12 new interested parties just in this week. So that's encouraging news. It's a great way to, help the environment and help your utility bills, which are among the highest for electricity anywhere in the country. On the airport, you heard discussion today about positive declaration under SECRA and how to move forward with a draft scope for a generic environmental impact study. There will be a comment period, which will continue for the next month from February 17th through March 18th. Again, you can email us or snail mail. The draft scope is posted on the town website, ehamptonny.gov. We will continue to meet and correspond with the FAA and other stakeholders, working on identifying and resolving any and all issues arising from the town's stated objective of opening a new private use airport on March 4th. And that concludes my liaison report. We do have a few resolutions to offer. Kathy, I believe you have the first one.
I do. It's Resolution 2022-266. It's to reappoint Richard White to the Assessment Review Board, retroactive from August 1st, 2021 through September 30th, 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
Resolution 2022-267 is approval of various special event permits, the Friends of Erin St. Patrick's Day Parade on various town roads, Sunday, March 27th from 12 to 3, and the Amagansett Chamber of Commerce 12th Annual Amagansett Parade, Saturday, March 19th from 12 to 1 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
I'd like to offer Resolution 2022-268. This is to rescind the waiver extension for southern pine beetles infestation. We did this initially through Resolution 2017-1167, which allowed owners to bring, this was for suppression and issued waivers for dumping of pitch pine trees. We are now to rescind that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
Resolution 2022-269 is to amend the fee Schedule B for the East Hampton Recycling Center fees. And I just want to point out, one, this was because Steve Lynch has requested this. We're also supposed to review these every year. So on page 5, it is contaminated brush has gone from $35 to $40 a yard.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
Resolution 2022-270 is a budget modification in sanitation, moving $550 from office expense to uniforms in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried.
Now I have resolution 2022-271 to increase cap for Regano LLC as environmental counsel 2021. And this is to where legal fees and expenses were authorized not to exceed $95,000, and the town has determined an increase in the cap on expenditures is now needed as matters are still pending regarding the East Hampton Airport. So the cap for the legal fees shall be paid out of the airport outside counsel professional budget line is now not to exceed the amount of $107,000. Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. We have issues to discuss in the exec session today.
Yes, I make a motion we go into exec session for CPF personnel, a residential easement discussion, and advice of counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passed and carried. So shall we reconvene at 2:45?
Sounds good.
Does that work for folks?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Terrific. Thanks very much, everyone. Be well. Stay safe. Get yourself a test kit.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, Jason.
Or Matt. I think Matt's still there.
Matt's there?
Thanks, Matt.
Matt.